Welcome back, Haunted Fears horror family. The Pacific Northwest hides something beneath its beauty, something that turned 11 normal lives into nightmares. Tonight, you'll hear their voices, the moments when everything went wrong. These aren't tales. These are real confessions from people who survived what they can't explain. Some will make you question reality. Others will make you grateful you weren't there. What would you do in their position? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what happens next. Let's find out together. I thought renting that beachfront cabin alone would help me clear my head after the divorce. I had no idea I'd bring something back with me that still hasn't left. Look, I'm not the type of person who believes in ghosts or supernatural stuff. I'm a software engineer from Portland. Logical, rational, the kind of guy who needs evidence before I accept anything. My name is Marvin, and I'm 38 years old. I've lived in the Pacific Northwest my entire life, and I've always loved the Oregon coast. But what happened to me at Cannon Beach in February of last year has shaken everything I thought I knew about reality. I'm sharing this because I need someone else to know, and maybe, just maybe, someone out there has experienced something similar and can tell me I'm not losing my mind. It was the off-season when I booked the cabin. I needed isolation after everything with Sarah fell apart. 20 years together, and it all ended over something so stupid I can barely remember what started the final fight. I just knew I needed space, needed to breathe, needed to be somewhere quiet where I could think. Cannon Beach seemed perfect, far enough from Portland to feel like an escape, but close enough that I could drive back if I needed to. The rental listing showed a small weathered cabin right on the beach, separated from the main tourist area. It looked perfect, lonely, but perfect. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon in early February. The weather was exactly what you'd expect: gray, drizzly, cold. The kind of Pacific Northwest winter day where the ocean and sky blend into one endless sheet of gray. The cabin was exactly as advertised: small, old, but clean. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with large windows facing the beach, and a wood-burning stove that became my best friend over the next few days. The owner had left instructions about the stove, the water heater, and a warning about the beach at night. Fog rolls in heavy after sunset, the note said. Don't go walking. Easy to get turned around. I should have paid more attention to that warning. The first 2 days were exactly what I needed. I walked the beach during the day, watching winter storms build on the horizon. I read books I'd been meaning to get to for years. I cooked simple meals and drank too much whiskey by the fire. I didn't check my phone except to let my brother know I was alive. It was healing in a way, the kind of solitude that lets you put your thoughts in order. On the third night, everything changed. I'd gone for a walk around sunset, which came early that time of year, around 5:30. The beach was completely empty, which wasn't surprising given the cold and the off-season. I walked north from the cabin, past the rocks and tide pools, listening to the waves crash and feeling the wind bite through my jacket. The air smelled like salt and seaweed and rain. I walked for maybe 20 minutes before I noticed the fog rolling in. Now, I've seen coastal fog before. It's normal. But this was different somehow. It came in fast, faster than I'd ever seen fog move. One moment I could see 100 yards up the beach, and the next moment I could barely see 20 feet. The weird thing was how it moved. Fog usually drifts with the wind, spreading out evenly. This fog seemed to have direction, like it was being pushed by something deliberate. I decided to head back. The cabin had lights on, and I figured I could follow the shoreline back easily enough. But as I walked, I started to get this uncomfortable feeling. You know that sensation when you think someone's watching you, that prickle on the back of your neck. I kept turning around, but there was nothing. Just wall after wall of gray fog. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Not loud, but clear. The wet slap of feet on packed sand. I stopped walking and turned around. The footsteps stopped too. I couldn't see anything in the fog except vague shapes that could have been rocks or driftwood. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded flat and dead in the thick air. No response. Just the sound of waves and wind. I started walking again, faster now. The footsteps resumed, matching my pace. I'd walk, they'd walk. I'd stop, they'd stop. My heart was hammering. I told myself it was just an echo, sound playing tricks in the fog. But I've walked beaches my whole life, and I've never heard an echo like that. When I finally saw the cabin lights through the fog, I practically ran the last 50 yards. I got inside, slammed the door, locked it, and stood there breathing hard, feeling ridiculous. I was a grown man, spooked by fog and phantom footsteps. I poured myself a whiskey and tried to laugh it off. But then I looked out the window, facing the beach, and my blood went cold. The fog was pressed against the glass, not just near it, pressed against it, like something pushing up against the window from outside. I could see the moisture condensing on the glass, see the fog moving in ways fog shouldn't move. It wasn't drifting. It was probing, searching, almost alive. I closed the curtains and backed away from the window. I turned on every light in the cabin and built up the fire until it was roaring. I told myself I was being irrational, that it was just weather, just fog doing what fog does. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something outside was aware of me, was looking for a way in. Around midnight, I heard the footsteps again. They circled the cabin. Slow, deliberate, wet footsteps on the wooden deck that wrapped around 3 sides of the building. I sat frozen on the couch, listening to them move from the beach side to the north side to the back, then around again. Whatever was making those sounds was walking in circles around my cabin. I grabbed my phone, thinking I'd call someone. The police, the cabin owner, anyone. But I had no service. The storm must have knocked out the cell towers. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with the fire going and every light on, listening to those footsteps circle and circle until dawn. When sunlight finally started filtering through the curtains, the footsteps stopped. I waited another hour before I had the courage to look outside. The fog was gone. The beach was empty. Everything looked normal in the gray morning light. But when I stepped onto the deck, I saw them. Wet footprints. They circled the entire cabin, overlapping in places where whatever made them had walked the same path over and over. The prints were roughly human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too long, too narrow, with spaces between the toes that looked more like webbing. I should have left right then. I should have thrown my stuff in the car and driven back to Portland without looking back. But it was morning. Everything looked normal. And I convinced myself I'd imagined the worst of it. Storm and fog and isolation can play tricks on your mind, right? The footprints could be explained. Maybe some drunk kids pranking the lone cabin renter. Maybe some weird beach erosion pattern. I was being irrational. I stayed. That second night was worse. The fog came in earlier, around 4 p.m., and it was thicker than before. I made sure everything was locked, curtains drawn, fire going. I'd even found an old baseball bat in the closet, which I kept next to the couch. Rational Marvin said I was being paranoid. The other part of me said paranoia was keeping me alive. The footsteps started at sunset, but this time they weren't alone. I heard breathing. Heavy, wet breathing right outside the windows, like something trying to draw air through water. And then I heard my name. Marvin. It was whispered but clear. My name, spoken by something standing outside my cabin. I felt my whole body go rigid. I didn't respond. I barely breathed. Marvin. Again from a different window. Then again from the door. Whatever was out there was moving around the cabin, saying my name at each window, each door. The voice was wrong, too hollow, too empty, like someone trying to imitate human speech without understanding how it worked. I sat there for hours, while it circled and whispered and breathed against my windows. At one point, I made the mistake of peeking through a gap in the curtains. In the fog, pressed up against the glass, I saw a face. Or something like a face. Pale, dripping, with eyes that were too large and too dark. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that it looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough that I recognized my own features twisted into something else, something that had been in the water too long. I screamed and fell backward, and the thing outside laughed. It laughed with my voice. I don't remember much of the rest of that night. I think I might have passed out from fear at some point. All I know is that when dawn came again, I threw everything into my car and left. I didn't check out properly, didn't even tell the owner I was leaving early. I just drove. But here's the thing that makes me know I'm not crazy. That proves it wasn't just my imagination or a breakdown. The fog followed me home. It showed up 3 days later, in Portland, in my apartment parking lot. I came home from work, and there it was, a patch of fog that shouldn't exist, hanging in the air near my car. Just a small patch, maybe 6 feet across, not moving despite the wind. I ran inside and watched from my window. The fog stayed there until dark, then disappeared. Since then, I've seen it a dozen times. It shows up outside my apartment, outside my office, outside my gym. Always a small patch, always unnatural, always aware of me somehow. And sometimes, when the fog is thick enough, I see that face again. My face, but not. Pale and dripping and watching me with those 2 large eyes. I've tried everything. I've moved apartments twice. I've talked to therapists who put me on medication for anxiety and PTSD. I've gone to priests and psychics and paranormal investigators, most of whom think I'm either lying or delusional. But it's still there. The fog still finds me. And I absolutely know, that whatever I brought back from Cannon Beach hasn't finished with me yet. I'm telling you this as a warning. If you ever rent a cabin on the Oregon coast, if you ever go walking in fog that moves wrong and comes in too fast, if you ever hear footsteps following you on an empty beach, run. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Don't stay to prove you're brave or rational. Just run, and maybe you'll be luckier than me. Maybe it won't follow you home. Because 5 months ago, I started seeing wet footprints in my apartment hallway. They lead to my door and stop. Something is still trying to get in, still circling, still waiting. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me. All I know is that every time the weather forecast calls for fog, I lock every door and window and pray that tonight isn't the night it finally figures out how to get inside. So if you're out there and you've experienced something similar, please tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me there's a way to make it stop, because I don't know how much longer I can live like this, always watching, always waiting for the fog to roll in and bring that thing, that wrong version of me, back to my door. The divorce feels like nothing now. All those problems that seem so important, they're meaningless compared to this. I'd give anything to go back to that Thursday in February and choose a different cabin, a different beach, a different escape. But I can't. I made my choice, and now I'm living with the consequences. The fog is outside my window right now as I write this. I can see it pressing against the glass. And somewhere in that fog, I know there's a face waiting. My face, pale and dripping, with eyes that have seen things no human should see. It's been circling for 9 months now, patient and persistent. I don't think it's going to wait much longer. The pages were so water damaged, we almost threw the whole thing away. If we had, maybe the 3 of us would still be friends, and maybe I wouldn't be looking over my shoulder every time I walk into a forest. My name is Philip, and I'm 26 years old. I work as a freelance photographer in Seattle, specializing in urban exploration and abandoned places. It's a niche market, but people love seeing photos of forgotten buildings, old factories, places where time stopped and nature started taking over. My buddies Ahmad and Keanu have been coming with me on these trips for about 2 years now. Ahmad does video documentation, and Keanu is just along for the thrill of it. He's an accountant during the week and lives for weekend adventures that make him feel alive. Last October, We decided to explore the Olympic National Forest. We'd heard rumors online about an old logging camp deep in the woods, abandoned since the 70s. Nobody seemed to have exact coordinates, but we pieced together information from old forestry maps and some forum posts from other urban explorers who'd tried and failed to find it. The challenge made it more appealing. We wanted to be the ones to document it properly, to bring back photos and video that would blow up our social media. We set out early on a Saturday morning, parking at a trailhead and then hiking off trail for about 3 hours. The forest was incredible. Massive old-growth trees, moss covering everything. That thick Pacific Northwest silence that makes you feel like you've stepped back in time. We used GPS and the old maps to navigate, and around noon, we found it. The logging camp was more intact than we expected. There were 5 main structures, 3 bunkhouses, what looked like an equipment shed, and a larger building that might have been a mess hall or office. Everything was weathered gray, overtaken by ferns and moss. Trees were growing through collapsed roofs. Windows were either broken or missing entirely. It was perfect for what we needed. We spent the first hour just exploring and photographing everything. Ahmad was getting great drone footage of the camp from above. Keanu was poking around the equipment shed, finding old rusted tools and logging equipment. I was focusing on the details, close-ups of decay, nature reclaiming human spaces. That kind of artistic stuff that does well on Instagram. It was in the second bunkhouse where we found the diary. The building was in worse shape than the others. The roof had partially collapsed, and everything inside was exposed to decades of rain. There were old metal bed frames, a table that had rotted through in the middle, and debris everywhere. Keanu was the one who spotted it, wedged between a fallen beam and the wall, wrapped in what looked like a piece of plastic tarp that had mostly disintegrated. "Guys, check this out," he called out, holding up a small leather-bound book. The cover was stained and warped from water damage, but it had survived. Better than it should have, probably because of that plastic wrapping. We gathered around as Keanu carefully opened it. The first few pages were illegible, the ink completely run together, but about 10 pages in, the writing became readable, though faint. It was clearly a personal journal, dated entries from 1976. The first readable entry was from March 15, 1976. Started work at the new camp today. About 40 of us here now. It's isolated as hell, but the pay is good. The foreman says we'll be here until at least November. The trees in this area are massive, some of the biggest I've seen in 20 years of logging. Normal stuff. We flipped through more pages, reading entries about work schedules, complaints about food, mentions of card games, and letters from home. Standard logging camp life from almost 50 years ago. Ahmad was filming me as I read some entries aloud, thinking it would make good content for his YouTube channel. Then the tone started changing. An entry from April 22, 1976. 3 guys didn't show up for breakfast this morning. Foreman organized a search party. We found their bunks empty, personal belongings still here. No signs they packed up and left. No signs of anything. They just vanished. The foreman radioed for help, but we're so remote it'll take days for anyone to get here. We exchanged looks. This was getting interesting. I took photos of the pages while Keanu held them open carefully. April 25th, 1976. The 3 men still haven't been found. Search teams covered miles in every direction. No tracks, no trace. It's like they evaporated. Some of the guys are spooked, talking about leaving. The foreman says anyone who leaves doesn't get paid. Most of us need the money bad enough to stay, but the mood has changed. Nobody wants to be alone. We travel in groups now, even just to the latrine. May 3rd, 1976. 2 more men disappeared. Both were on the same work crew, cutting on the north side. Their partners said they just turned around and the men were gone. No sound, no struggle. Gone. The foreman is saying they deserted, but their belongings are still here. One of them left his wallet with cash in it. Nobody abandons cash. I'm starting to think something in these woods is taking people. The handwriting was getting shakier, more urgent. My heart was beating faster as I read. This wasn't just interesting for content. This was something real, something disturbing that apparently never made the news or got investigated properly. May 10th, 1956. 15 men have disappeared now. 15. The foreman finally called for full evacuation, but they can't get helicopters in because of weather. We're supposed to hike out tomorrow at first light, all together. Nobody's sleeping. We're all in the mess hall with every light we have going. We can hear something moving outside, not animals. Something that walks upright but doesn't sound right. Footsteps that are too heavy, too deliberate. It circles the camp every night after dark. Holy hell, Ahmad whispered, his camera still recording. May 11th, 1976. It came inside last night. The mess hall door was locked. All windows were covered. But something came inside. I saw it. We all saw it. Too tall to be human, moving wrong, like its joints bent in ways they shouldn't. It stood in the corner, just watching us. When we shined lights on it, there was nothing there, but we could still hear it breathing. Heavy, wet breathing. My hands were shaking as I turned the page. The next entry was the last one, dated May 12th, 1976. Morning now. We tried to leave at dawn, but couldn't find the trail out. The forest looks different. Trees are in wrong places, landmarks are gone. It's like the woods have rearranged themselves to keep us here. 8 men tried to leave anyway, just picked a direction and ran. We heard them screaming for about 10 minutes, and then silence. Something is hunting us, something that lives in this forest and doesn't want us to leave. I'm writing this because if someone finds this journal, you need to know. Don't come looking for this camp. Don't come looking for us. Get out of these woods and don't come back. It's in the camp now. The entry just stopped. The pen had dragged across the page like the person writing had been interrupted violently. We stood there in silence for a long moment. The forest around us suddenly felt different, more oppressive, like it was pressing in. I became very aware of how deep in the woods we were, how far from the trail, how long it would take us to get back to the car. This is insane, Keanu said, but his voice was uncertain. This has to be fake, right? Like someone left this here as a prank for urban explorers? The paper's old, I said, looking at it more closely. This isn't recent. And why would someone prank a place that hardly anyone can find? Ahmad was filming everything, his face pale but excited. Dude, we have to research this. If this is real, if there really were disappearances at a logging camp in 1976, that's huge. That's a real mystery. Or, Keanu said slowly, what if it's real, and we're standing in the exact same place where something took 40 men? That thought settled over us like cold water. I looked around the bunkhouse with new eyes. Those rusted bed frames. Men had slept there. Men who vanished and were never found. Was this actually a crime scene? Was this place actually dangerous? We should go, I said, closing the diary carefully. We got what we came for. Let's head back. Nobody argued. We packed up our equipment quickly, all of us moving with sudden urgency. I kept the diary, wrapping it back in the degraded plastic tarp and putting it in my backpack. Ahmad collapsed his drone and packed his camera gear. Keanu, who had been so excited on the hike in, looked pale and kept glancing at the forest around us. The hike back should have taken 3 hours. It took us 5. The trail markers we'd left were gone. The GPS kept losing signal, showing us in wrong locations. The forest looked different, not dramatically, but enough that we kept second-guessing our direction. Trees that we'd photographed on the way in seemed to be in different positions. Rock formations we'd used as landmarks weren't where they should be. This doesn't make sense, Ahmad said, checking his GPS for the 100th time. We should have hit the main trail an hour ago. Maybe we're going in circles, Keanu suggested, but his voice was tight with stress. I pulled out my compass, trying to stay calm. Let's just keep heading west. Eventually we'll hit either the trail or the road. But the compass needle was spinning slowly, never quite settling on a direction. I tapped it, thinking it was broken, but no. It just kept spinning lazily, like it couldn't find magnetic north. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps in the forest behind us. Not the crack of twigs that animals make. Actual footsteps, like someone walking through the undergrowth in boots. We froze, listening. The footsteps stopped when we stopped. "Hello?" Ahmad called out. "Is someone there?" No response. Just the forest silence and the drip of water from the trees. We started walking again, faster now. The footsteps resumed, matching our pace. When we slowed, they slowed. When we sped up, they sped up. Always behind us, always out of sight. "Run," I said. We ran. I don't know how long we ran through that forest. Time became elastic, meaningless. We crashed through ferns and around trees, our backpacks bouncing, equipment clanging. The footsteps followed us, never getting closer but never falling behind. And then we'd hear them ahead of us too, cutting us off. Then to our sides, like multiple things were pacing us, hurting us. Finally, gasping and exhausted, we burst out onto the main trail. The change was instant. The oppressive feeling lifted. The air felt lighter. And when I checked my compass again, the needle pointed steady north. We looked back at the forest we'd just emerged from, but saw nothing. The footsteps had stopped. We didn't talk much on the hike back to the car. We were too shaken, too exhausted, too busy trying to make sense of what had happened. When we finally reached the parking lot, the sun was setting, painting everything orange and purple. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it just felt like we'd barely made it out before dark. That night, back at my apartment in Seattle, I did research. I searched for logging camp disappearances in Olympic National Forest in 1976. I found nothing. No news articles, no missing person reports, no mention of a camp or its workers. It was like it never existed. But I had the diary. I had proof that something happened. Keanu refuses to talk about it. He won't return my calls. Ahmad posted some of the footage to YouTube but took it down after 3 days, saying the comments were too weird, and that he was getting strange messages from anonymous accounts telling him to forget what we found. I still have the diary. I've tried to verify names mentioned in it, but I can't find records of any of them. It's like those men were erased from history. Sometimes I think about going to the authorities, showing them what we found. But what would I say? That I found a diary that claimed something supernatural killed 40 loggers in a camp that apparently never existed. They'd laugh me out of the station. The worst part is what happened 3 weeks after our trip. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound outside my apartment window. Heavy, deliberate footsteps pacing back and forth on the fire escape. I live on the 4th floor. There's no reason for anyone to be on that fire escape. I didn't look. I just lay in bed, frozen, listening to those footsteps until dawn. They come back sometimes. Not every night, but often enough. Always the same. Methodical pacing, back and forth. Like something is waiting for me to look, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I've tried recording the sound, but it never shows up on audio. Just empty noise. I haven't been back to Olympic National Forest. I don't think I ever will. But sometimes, when I'm editing photos or writing, I feel like something is standing behind me just out of sight. That same presence we felt in the forest. Like whatever was in those woods followed us home. Or like finding that diary connected us to something that doesn't want to be forgotten. I keep thinking about that last diary entry, how it ended mid-sentence. I think about the writer, pen in hand, suddenly interrupted by something that had come for him. I wonder if he screamed. I wonder if anyone heard him. I wonder if his bones are still out there in that forest, scattered among the trees that are slowly erasing all evidence that humans were ever there at all. And I wonder if whatever took him and the others is still there, waiting in that abandoned camp for the next group of curious explorers who think they're just documenting a piece of forgotten history. If you're reading this and you're thinking about looking for that camp, please don't. Some places are abandoned for good reasons. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Because now I know the truth. Those woods remember. And worse than that, they wait. The rain was coming down so hard that night I almost didn't see him standing there on the side of the road, Looking back now, I wish I'd kept driving. My name is Truitt, and I'm a long-haul truck driver. I've been doing this job for 12 years, driving up and down the West Coast, making deliveries from San Diego to Seattle and everywhere in between. I've seen a lot of strange things on the road over the years. Accidents, weird weather, people doing inexplicable things at 3 in the morning. But nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever shaken me the way that night on Highway 101 did. It was late February, about 2 months ago. I was hauling electronics from Eugene, Oregon, down to Crescent City, California. The coastal route along Highway 101 is beautiful during the day, but at night, especially in winter storms, it's one of the loneliest stretches of road you can imagine. Miles and miles of nothing but dark ocean on one side and darker forest on the other. Cell service is spotty at best. You don't see other cars for long stretches. It's just you, your headlights, and whatever thoughts are rattling around in your head. I left Eugene around 9 p.m., planning to drive straight through and arrive in Crescent City by 3 or 4 in the morning. The weather report had mentioned rain, but this was the Pacific Northwest. It was always raining. I didn't think much of it. I had my coffee, my podcast downloaded, and a full tank of diesel. Everything seemed routine. The storm hit around midnight, somewhere south of Florence. Not just rain, a wall of water that turned my windshield into a waterfall even with the wipers on full blast. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. I slowed way down, gripping the wheel tight, focusing on the white line at the edge of the road. This was the kind of weather where you just survive, mile by mile, and hope you make it through. I'd been creeping along like that for maybe 30 minutes when my headlights caught him. A man standing on the shoulder of the road, completely drenched. He wasn't waving or trying to flag me down, just standing there, facing the road, water streaming off him. In that split second as I passed, I saw he was wearing jeans and a dark jacket, no hat, no umbrella, just standing in the downpour in the middle of nowhere. My first instinct was to keep going. You don't pick up hitchhikers as a rule, especially not at midnight on a deserted highway in a storm. It's dangerous. People are unpredictable. I had a schedule to keep, but something made me look in my side mirror, and I saw him still standing there, not moving, just getting smaller in the distance. And I thought about what would happen if I broke down out here. What if I needed help and everyone just drove past? I thought about karma, about being the kind of person who helps, or the kind who doesn't. I thought about my daughter, who's about the same age as that guy looked, and how I'd want someone to help her if she was stranded. I slowed down and pulled over. In my rearview mirror, I watched him walk toward the truck, not hurry, just walk at a normal pace, like he had all the time in the world despite the torrential rain. When he reached the passenger door, I leaned over and opened it. "Get in," I called out over the sound of the storm. He climbed up into the cab without a word, bringing a flood of water with him. In the dome light, I got my first good look at him. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Dark wet hair plastered to his head, pale skin. Normal-looking guy, really, except for his eyes. They were dark and oddly still, like he wasn't quite focusing on anything. "Thanks for stopping," he said. His voice was quiet, almost flat. "No problem. Where you headed?" "South," he said. "Just south." I waited for more details, but he didn't offer any. Okay, I thought. Maybe he's in shock from being out in the cold. "You okay? You need a hospital or something?" "No, just south." I put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The rain was still hammering down, and I had to concentrate on driving. The guy sat there, dripping water onto the floor mat, not saying anything, just staring straight ahead. I tried to break the silence. "Car breakdown or something." "Something like that." "You got someone you need to call? Family, friend? You can use my phone if yours died." "No need." This was getting uncomfortable. I glanced over at him again, and that's when I noticed he wasn't shivering. He was completely soaked. The cab wasn't that warm yet, and he wasn't shivering at all. No goosebumps, no hugging himself, nothing. Just sitting there like he was perfectly comfortable. You sure you're okay? You're soaking wet, man. He turned to look at me then, and I felt my stomach drop. His eyes, God, his eyes were so dark and empty, like looking into two holes that went nowhere. I'm fine, Truett. The truck swerved. I jerked it back into the lane, my heart suddenly pounding. What did you say? I said I'm fine. No, you said my name. How do you know my name? He didn't answer, just turned his head to look out the windshield again, water still dripping from his hair, his clothes pooling around his feet. Hey, I said, my voice sharper now. How do you know my name? You told me. I didn't tell you anything. We haven't had a conversation. How do you know my name? He was quiet for a long moment, and the only sounds were the rain hammering the truck and my wipers squeaking frantically back and forth. Then he spoke again, still in that flat, empty voice. You don't remember me, Squirt. Everything inside me went cold. Squirt. Nobody called me that. Nobody except my grandfather, and he'd been dead for 18 years. What did you just say? You don't remember, Squirt. All those summers at the lake, you and me fishing off the dock. My hands were shaking on the wheel. My grandfather, Pap we called him, had taken me fishing every summer from when I was 5 until he died when I was 15. He was the only person who ever called me Squirt. I never told anyone that nickname. It died with him. Who the hell are you? The man turned to look at me again, and this time I saw water running down his face. Not rain. Water coming from inside like he was crying, but his expression hadn't changed at all, just blank and empty with water streaming down. You know who I am, Squirt. You left me at the lake. You promised you'd come back. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. I was hallucinating from exhaustion, from stress, from staring at white lines in the rain for too long. But the man was real. I could hear him breathing, that wet, heavy breathing like lungs full of water. Get out, I said. Get out of my truck right now. Can't do that. Not yet. I've been waiting for you. 18 years, waiting by the side of the road, hoping you'd come back, hoping you'd stop. I was panicking now, really panicking. I looked for somewhere to pull over, but there was nothing. Just dark road and rain and miles of empty highway. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know you. Whatever this is, whatever game you're playing. Not a game, Squirt. You know what you did. You know why I'm here. And then I smelled it. Lake water. That specific smell of stagnant lake water, weeds and algae and decay. It was filling the cab, getting stronger, and when I looked down, I saw water pooling on the floor, more water than could possibly be coming from wet clothes. It was rising, covering the floor mats, creeping up toward the pedals. What are you? I was shouting now, not caring how crazy I sounded. You killed me, Squirt. That last summer. You and your friends, playing around on the dock. You pushed me and I hit my head and I sank. You were scared, so you didn't tell anyone. You let them think I just wandered off, drowned, an accident. That's not, I didn't kill anyone. But even as I said it, something was stirring in my memory, something I'd buried so deep I'd almost convinced myself it never happened. That last summer at the lake, I was 15. There had been another kid there, some local kid who hung around the dock. We'd gotten into an argument about something stupid. And yeah, there had been pushing, and he'd fallen, and no, he'd gotten back up. He'd been fine. He'd walked away. I'd seen him walk away, hadn't I? You left me in the water, the man said, and his voice was starting to change, getting wetter, thicker. Cold and dark. 18 years at the bottom of that lake, waiting. And then I found my way here, to this road, knowing you'd come eventually. All I had to do was wait. The water in the cab was up to my ankles now, cold and reeking of decay. I couldn't think straight, couldn't breathe right. I had to get out, I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on the wet road, fishtailing violently. I fought the wheel, hearing cargo shift in the trailer behind me. We slid for what felt like forever before, finally jerking to a stop sideways across the highway. I turned to look at the passenger seat. It was empty. Just a soaking, wet seat cushion and a massive puddle of water on the floor. The dome light was on, illuminating the empty cab. No hitchhiker. No man with dead eyes. Just water everywhere, and that smell of stagnant lake water making me gag. I threw open the door and jumped out into the rain, stumbling, nearly falling. I looked around wildly, but there was nothing. No one. Just rain and darkness, and my truck sitting crooked in the middle of Highway 101. I stood there in the downpour, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Had I fallen asleep? Hallucinated? But the water in the cab was real. The smell was real. And that nickname, Squirt, that was real too. I forced myself to get back in the truck. I had to move it before someone came around a curve and slammed into me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel, but I managed to straighten out and pull onto the shoulder. I sat there for a long time, lights flashing, trying to calm down enough to drive. I kept looking at the passenger seat, at the puddle of water that shouldn't be there. I kept smelling lake water, and I kept thinking about that summer. The last summer at Pap's Lake House. The local kid who used to hang around. The argument. The push. The splash. Had he gotten up? I'd been so sure he'd gotten up and walked away. But now, sitting in my truck with the smell of death all around me, I couldn't remember clearly. Had I checked? Had I helped him? Or had I just run, scared of getting in trouble, and convinced myself he was fine? I pulled out my phone. No service, but I'd try when I got closer to town. I needed to know. I needed to look up drownings at that lake in the summer of 2007. I needed to know if a kid had died that summer, and I'd just blocked it out, buried it so deep in my mind that I'd rewritten my own history. Eventually, I started driving again. Slowly, carefully, watching the road and also watching the passenger seat, terrified that he'd be there again. The smell gradually faded. The water didn't refill, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still with me somehow, sitting in that wet seat, watching me with those empty, dead eyes. I made it to Crescent City just before dawn. I went straight to the police station, not to my delivery. I told them everything, the hitchhiker, the name, the water, the lake. They were polite but skeptical. They took a report because I insisted, but I could see them exchanging glances. Truck driver, alone on the road, probably exhausted, probably imagined it all. But then one older cop pulled me aside. "You said Highway 101 near Florence," he asked. "That stretch has a reputation. Other drivers have reported picking up hitchhikers who disappear. Always in storms. Always young men. Some of them say the hitchhikers knew things they shouldn't know." I felt my blood turn to ice. "Has anyone else mentioned lake water?" He looked at me for a long moment. "One guy, about 5 years ago, said the hitchhiker smelled like drowning." I spent the rest of that day researching. I found old newspaper archives from 2007, and there it was. Local youth drowns in lake accident. A 17-year-old kid had drowned at Clear Lake in August 2007. They'd found his body 3 days after he was reported missing. Blunt force trauma to the head, probably from hitting his head on the dock. The death was ruled an accidental drowning. I remembered him then. Really remembered him. His name was Daniel. He'd taught me how to bait a hook properly. He'd told me about his plan to join the Coast Guard after high school. And I'd pushed him during a stupid argument, and he'd fallen. And I'd heard the crack when his head hit the dock, and I'd seen him slip into the water, and I'd been too scared to tell anyone, so I'd run home and never said a word. For 18 years, I'd buried it so deep I'd genuinely forgotten. But he hadn't forgotten. Even dead, drowned, at the bottom of that lake, he hadn't forgotten. I tried to drive back to Eugene the next day, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't get back on Highway 101. I took the inland route instead, adding 3 hours to my trip. I haven't driven that coastal highway since. I put in a request to change my routes, and my company, probably thinking I was having some kind of breakdown. Agreed. But it doesn't matter what road I take. 3 weeks after that night, I picked up another hitchhiker. Different highway, different state, but the same empty eyes. He got in, dripped water on my floor, and whispered "squirt" before disappearing. He's found me 4 times now. Different places, always when it's raining, always impossible to avoid. And each time, he stays a little longer. Each time, the water gets a little deeper. Each time, he looks a little more like what he must look like now after 18 years underwater. I don't know what he wants from me. Confession. Punishment. Maybe he just wants me to remember, to carry the weight of what I did. Or maybe he's waiting for the night when the water rises high enough that I can't escape, when my truck fills up completely, and I understand what it felt like for him. Cold and dark and drowning, while someone who could have helped just walked away. I'm writing this as a warning and maybe as a confession. If you're driving the Pacific Northwest and you see someone on the side of the road in the rain, especially Highway 101, especially at night, don't stop. I know that sounds cruel, but whatever's standing there might not be what it seems. And if you pick it up, if you let it into your car, it might know things about you that you've tried to forget, things you've buried so deep you don't even remember them yourself, because the dead don't forget. They wait. And when you finally stop to help, they get in, and they remind you of exactly what you owe them. I still smell lake water, sometimes when I'm driving. Still see wet footprints on my floor that dry up when I look directly at them. And I know that one of these nights, he's going to get in my truck and he's not going to leave. The water will keep rising, and I'll finally pay for what I did all those years ago. If that happens, if you hear about a trucker who drowned in his cab on a dry night, you'll know why. You'll know that some debts follow you forever, no matter how fast you drive or how far you go. The dead remember, and they always find their way home. The day I inherited my uncle's cabin in the Mount Hood area, the lawyer handed me 2 sets of keys and a look I couldn't quite read. 3 months later, I understood why. My name is Remington, and before last summer, I was living a pretty normal life in Portland working as a real estate appraiser. When my uncle Nathaniel died suddenly of a heart attack at 52, I was shocked. Not just by his death, but by the fact that he'd left me his cabin. We weren't particularly close. He was my dad's older brother, the weird one who never married, never had kids, and spent most of his time alone in the mountains. Family gatherings were awkward when he showed up, which wasn't often. He'd sit in the corner, barely talking, always seeming like he wanted to be somewhere else. The cabin itself was about an hour east of Portland, up in the Mount Hood National Forest area. Remote, but not impossibly so. The lawyer explained that Nathaniel had been living there full-time for the past 15 years, ever since he retired early from whatever job he'd had. Nobody in the family really knew what he did for work. He was just private. I didn't plan on keeping it initially. My job is literally evaluating properties for their market value, so I figured I'd go up there, do a quick assessment, clean it out, and put it on the market. Easy money to pad my savings account. The housing market in Oregon was hot, and mountain properties were selling fast. I drove up on a Saturday in late June, following the directions the lawyer had provided. The last 3 miles were on a rough dirt road that wound through dense forest. When I finally arrived, I had to admit the location was beautiful. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by massive Douglas firs and cedars, with a small creek running nearby. 2 stories, log construction, probably built in the 70s, based on the style. It looked well maintained from the outside, which was a good sign for resale value. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled stale and dusty, but not terrible. The main floor was open concept, living room, kitchen, and dining area all flowing together. Wood-paneled walls, a stone fireplace, furniture that looked comfortable but dated. Upstairs, I found 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Everything seemed normal, if a bit sad knowing my uncle had died alone up here. Being a real estate appraiser, I automatically started taking mental notes and measurements. That's when I noticed something odd. I walked the exterior of the cabin, counting windows and estimating dimensions. Then I went back inside and paced off the interior rooms. The numbers didn't match. The cabin's exterior dimensions suggested about 1,800 square feet, but the interior only added up to about 1,500. 300 square feet was missing somewhere. At first, I thought maybe it was just the thickness of the log walls or my measurements being off. But I do this for a living. I'm good with spatial, reasoning, and dimensions. I went through the cabin again, more carefully this time, looking at the walls, checking for inconsistencies. On the main floor, everything seemed to line up, but when I measured the upstairs, I found the problem. The hallway between the two bedrooms was wrong. It was too short. Based on the exterior dimensions and the size of the bedrooms, there should have been another 8 to 10 feet of space somewhere. I stood in that hallway, staring at the wall between the bedrooms, and realized that one of the bedrooms should have extended further than it did. There was space behind that wall that didn't exist on any floor plan. I went down to the basement, which I'd only glanced at earlier. It was partially finished. Concrete floor, exposed beams, storage boxes, and old furniture covered in sheets. I measured down there too, and again, the dimensions were off. Part of the basement seemed to extend beyond the footprint of the house above it, which was architecturally weird, but possible. But there was definitely hidden space somewhere in this structure. That's when I started looking for access points. I checked closets, examined walls for seams or hollow sounds, moved furniture, nothing. The hidden space was completely sealed off as far as I could tell. I was starting to think maybe it was just dead space, something left over from how the cabin was constructed, not actually a room. But then I found the false wall in the basement. It was behind a tall shelving unit that I'd moved while exploring. The wall looked normal at first, but when I knocked on it, the sound was hollow. I ran my hands along the wood paneling, feeling for a seam, and found one, a section about 3 feet wide that was separate from the rest of the wall. I pushed on it, and with a click, it swung inward like a door. Behind it was darkness, and a smell that made my stomach turn. Old, stale air mixed with something else, something chemical or medicinal that had soured over time. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam revealed a narrow hallway, maybe 3 feet wide, leading deeper under the house. The walls were unfinished concrete, and the floor was dirt. I stood at the threshold, every instinct telling me not to go in there, but curiosity and a weird sense of obligation pushed me forward. This was my property now. I needed to know what was here. I stepped into the hidden hallway, my phone light cutting through the darkness. After about 10 feet, the hallway opened into a room. A hidden room about 12 by 15 feet, dug out beneath the house like a bunker, or I didn't know what to call it. The room was furnished. There was a cot with a stained mattress, a small table, a chair, and a bucket in the corner that I really didn't want to think about. But what made my blood run cold was everything else. The walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all tacked up or taped to the concrete. I walked closer, shining my light across them, and felt my stomach twist. They were photos of people, hikers, based on their gear and the outdoor settings. Different people, different ages, both men and women. Some were candid shots taken from a distance, like someone had been watching them without their knowledge. Others were closer, more detailed. Each photo had a date written on it in marker. The dates ranged from 2007 to just a few months before Nathaniel died. 15 years of photographs of strangers. On the table, I found a notebook. I didn't want to open it, but I had to. Inside were entries, written in handwriting I vaguely recognized as my uncle's from Christmas cards he used to send. The entries were like a log, each one corresponding to one of the photographs on the wall. June 14th, 2009, Trail 459, female, late 20s, solo hiker. Pack color red, departed 4:15 p.m. August 3rd, 2011, creek crossing near property line, male, early 30s, with dog. Pack color, blue-gray, departed 2:30 p.m. Page after page of observations. People who had apparently hiked near the property, documented, photographed, tracked. The word departed appeared in every entry, followed by a time. I didn't know what it meant. Departed the area, or something else. And then I found the driver's licenses. They were in a wooden box on the shelf, maybe 20 or 25 of them, each in a small plastic sleeve. I spread them out on the table with shaking hands, my phone light revealing face after face of people I didn't know. The licenses were from different states: Oregon, Washington, California, Idaho, different years, different names. My mind was racing. This was evidence of something terrible. People whose identification documents were hidden in my dead uncle's secret room. I thought about those notebook entries, about the word departed, and felt sick. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but there was no service. Of course there wasn't. I was too deep in the mountains, too remote. I'd have to drive back toward town to get a signal. I started to back out of the room, but then I noticed something else. In the corner, partially hidden behind the cot, was another door, a smaller one like a crawlspace access. It was secured with a heavy padlock. I should have left right then. I should have gotten in my car and driven straight to the police. But something compelled me to know what was behind that door. I found a crowbar in the main basement and came back. The padlock was old and rusted, and after a few minutes of prying, it broke free. I pulled the small door open and shined my light inside. The smell hit me immediately. Earth and decay and something worse. The space beyond was even smaller, maybe 6 feet deep, more of a crawl space than a room, and inside, wrapped in plastic tarps, were bundles. Long bundles, body-shaped bundles. I stumbled backward, dropping my phone. The light spun crazily across the walls of photos before landing face up on the dirt floor. In the dim, reflected glow, I could see those photographs staring down at me. All those hikers, all those faces. I scrambled out of the hidden room, through the false door, and up the basement stairs. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my car keys. I got in my car and drove down that mountain road faster than was safe, not stopping until I hit cell service about 15 miles down. Then I pulled over and called 911. The investigation that followed made national news. They found remains of 7 people in that crawl space. Hikers who had gone missing over a span of 15 years in the Mount Hood National Forest. My uncle Nathaniel had apparently been targeting solo hikers who came near his property, people who wouldn't be immediately missed, people whose disappearances could be explained by the dangers of wilderness hiking. He'd been meticulous, careful, patient, a serial killer hiding in plain sight, and none of us in the family had any idea. The FBI found more evidence in the cabin: camping gear, personal items, detailed maps of hiking trails with notations of good hunting grounds. He'd been doing this for years, and he probably would have kept doing it if that heart attack hadn't stopped him. The lawyer told me later that Nathaniel had left the cabin to me specifically, with instructions that I was to take care of the property. I still don't know what he meant by that. Did he want me to continue what he'd started, destroy the evidence, or was it some twisted way of confessing? I had to testify at multiple hearings. The families of the victims wanted answers I couldn't give them. How was he related to me? What kind of person was he? Did I ever suspect anything? The truth was, I barely knew him. He was just the weird uncle who lived alone in the mountains, and we'd all been content to leave it at that. Nobody asked questions. Nobody checked on him, and 7 people died because of it. The cabin was eventually torn down as part of the investigation. The property still belongs to me legally, but I'll never go back there. I tried to sell the land, but nobody wants property with that kind of history attached to it. It just sits there now, an empty clearing in the forest where terrible things happened. The worst part is knowing that I walked through that cabin, lived in the same space where he planned those murders, ate meals at the same table where he organized his hunting logs. I inherited more than just property from Nathaniel. I inherited the knowledge that evil can live quietly next door, can smile at family gatherings, can seem completely normal while hiding unspeakable things behind false walls. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking about that room, about those photographs on the walls, about what those people went through in their final moments. I think about the driver's licenses, how each one represented a life, a family, friends, people who just wanted to hike in the beautiful Oregon mountains and never came home. And I think about how easily we ignore the spaces that don't add up, the measurements that seem off, the walls that hide things we don't want to know about. We walk past them every day, accepting what we see on the surface, never looking deeper. But sometimes, behind those walls, there are secrets that change everything. If you ever inherit property from someone you didn't know well, do yourself a favor. Check the dimensions, walk the perimeter, and compare it to the interior. Look for the spaces that don't make sense, the rooms that aren't on the floor. Plan. Because sometimes the reason someone lived alone for so long is that they couldn't risk anyone getting too close. And sometimes the things they're hiding are worth hiding at any cost. I don't do property appraisals anymore. I couldn't go back to measuring spaces, evaluating structures, examining floor plans. Every time I looked at a blueprint, I'd think about hidden rooms and false walls and what might be lurking in the spaces between. Some knowledge changes you permanently, and you can never go back to seeing the world the way you did before. My uncle's cabin is gone now, but those photographs are burned into my memory. Faces of people who trusted the wilderness, who believed they were safe, who had no idea they were being watched, being hunted, being documented like specimens in some twisted collection. The FBI closed 7 cold cases, and 7 families finally got some form of closure, though I can't imagine it brought them any peace. As for me, I'm still trying to process the fact that I'm related to someone who did those things, that his blood runs in my veins, that at family gatherings, I sat in the same room with a monster and never knew it. They say everyone has secrets, but some secrets have bodies, and some floor plans are missing rooms for very, very dark reasons. 3 days ago, I stopped being able to sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that pale hand breaking the surface of the water. I'm Maxine, and I need to get this down while I still remember everything clearly, before my mind tries to convince me it didn't happen. My partner Kate and I went on what was supposed to be a romantic 4-day kayaking trip through the San Juan Islands in early September. We'd been planning it for months, just the 2 of us, camping on remote islands, paddling through some of the most beautiful water in the Pacific Northwest. We're both experienced kayakers, we had all the right gear, and we checked the weather obsessively before leaving. Everything should have been perfect. The first 2 days were exactly that. We launched from Anacortes on a Wednesday morning, paddled out to James Island, and set up camp. The weather was incredible. Clear skies, calm water, that perfect early fall temperature where you're comfortable in a light jacket. We spent those first days exploring tide pools, watching seals, cooking over our camp stove, and falling asleep to the sound of waves lapping against the shore. It was everything we'd hoped for. On the 3rd day, we decided to paddle out to a smaller, more remote island that Kate had found on the map. It wasn't an official campsite, just a tiny outcrop of rock and trees about 2 miles from where we'd been staying. The water was deeper out there, away from the shallower passages between the main islands. Kate wanted to see if we could spot orcas, which sometimes traveled through that area. We set out around 10 in the morning, our kayaks loaded with lunch and camera equipment. The paddling was easy, and within an hour we were approaching the small island. That's when things started feeling wrong. The water changed. I don't know how else to describe it. One moment we were paddling through normal Puget Sound water, greenish, a little murky, typical Pacific Northwest Ocean. Then suddenly it got darker. Not just deeper looking, but actually darker, like something was blocking the light from below. Kate noticed it too. "The water looks weird," she said from her kayak, which was about 10 feet from mine. "Yeah, I was just thinking that." We both stopped paddling and drifted for a moment, looking down into the water beside our boats. I could see maybe 3 feet down before everything went black. And it wasn't a gradual fade. It was like looking into a hole, a sharp line where visibility just ended. "Must be a really deep channel here," Kate said, but she sounded uncertain. We started paddling again, and that's when I felt it. The temperature dropped. Not the air. The air was still warm and sunny. The water. I could feel cold radiating up from the depths, making my hands ache where they gripped the paddle, making the bottom of my kayak feel icy against my legs. "Kate, do you feel that?" "The cold?" "Yeah, this is really weird." We should have turned back then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to turn around and paddle back to the main islands. But we were so close to the outcrop, and it seemed stupid to come all this way just to chicken out because the water was cold and dark. We reached the island and pulled our kayaks up onto a narrow rocky beach. The place was tiny, maybe 50 feet across, covered in windswept trees and rough grass. We walked around it in about 5 minutes. Nothing unusual, just another small San Juan island. But the feeling of wrongness persisted. Everything was too quiet. No birds, no seals, no sound except the wind and water. "Let's eat lunch and head back," I suggested, and Kate agreed immediately. Neither of us wanted to stay. We sat on the rocks eating sandwiches, not talking much, both of us watching the water. That's when I saw it move. Not waves. The water itself moved, like something huge had passed underneath, displacing a massive amount of water without breaking the surface. A bulge rolled through the dark water about 30 yards from shore, and then another, heading away from us toward the open channel. "Kate." "I see it." We watched as the bulges moved in a pattern, one then another like something with a long body undulating beneath the surface, too big for a seal, too big for a whale even, and moving wrong with a deliberate quality that made my skin crawl. After about a minute, the water settled. Whatever it was had moved away. We packed up our lunch in silence and got back in our kayaks without discussing it. We just wanted to leave. The paddle back should have taken an hour. It took 3. The water had become harder to move through, thick and resistant like paddling through syrup. Our kayaks felt heavy, sluggish, and the dark water followed us. No matter which direction we paddled, that black depth stayed underneath us, a circle of darkness that moved with us instead of us moving away from it. "This doesn't make sense," Kate kept saying. "Deep water doesn't follow boats. That's not how water works." But it was following us. We could see the normal greenish water ahead, and every time we got close to it, the darkness would spread, swallowing it, keeping us surrounded. And then we heard the breathing. It came from all around us, but especially from below. Heavy, wet breathing, like something trying to draw air through water. The sound made my chest tight with panic. I looked over at Kate, and her face was white. "Paddle faster," she said. We dug our paddles in as hard as we could, racing toward the greenish water that kept retreating. My arms burned, my back screamed, but I didn't slow down. The breathing got louder, coming in rhythmic huffs that seemed to match our paddle strokes. That's when I saw the hand. It broke the surface about 20 feet to my left, pale, elongated, with fingers that were too long and spaces between them like webbing. It reached up, dripping black water, and then sank back down without a splash. Just slid back under like it had never been there. "Kate, did you see? Paddle, just paddle." Another hand, this time on the right side, and another behind us. They were reaching up from the darkness all around our kayaks, breaking the surface for just seconds before sliding back down. Never grabbing, never threatening, just reaching, showing us they were there. I was crying and paddling, making sounds I didn't recognize as my own voice. Kate was screaming directions. Left, harder, keep going. and I just followed her, too terrified to think. Finally, after what felt like hours, we burst into normal water. The change was instant. The darkness ended in a sharp line behind us, and suddenly we were in regular green water, warm and clear. The hands disappeared. The breathing stopped. We paddled straight back to James Island, loaded our kayaks onto our car in record time, and drove home without setting up camp or discussing what had happened. We just ran. That was 3 days ago. We haven't talked about it since. We can't seem to find the words. But yesterday, Kate called me from her apartment. "Maxine," she said, and her voice was shaking. "I woke up this morning and there was water all over my bedroom floor. Salt water. I live on the 3rd floor. There's no way for water to get in." I felt my blood turn to ice. I had the same thing. In my bathroom. Puddles of salt water that weren't there when I went to bed. We both went quiet, and in that silence, I heard it. Through the phone, faint but unmistakable, that wet, heavy breathing. "Kate, do you hear?" "It's not on the phone," she whispered. "It's in my apartment, behind the bathroom door." I looked at my own bathroom door, closed across the room from where I sat. As I watched, salt water began seeping out from underneath it, spreading across my floor. The breathing was in my apartment too. "What do we do?" Kate's voice was barely audible. I didn't have an answer. The door handle started to turn, water flowing faster now, and through the phone I heard Kate scream. The motel clerk smiled at me like we were old friends. "Welcome back, Boston," she said, sliding my key across the counter. I'd never been to this town before in my life, and my name isn't on any reservation. Let me back up. My name is Boston. Yeah, like the city, my parents thought they were being unique, and I'm a sales rep for industrial equipment. I drive all over the Pacific Northwest making deliveries and meeting with clients. It's boring work, but it pays well, and I like being on the road. 3 weeks ago, in mid-November, I was driving through rural Idaho near the Montana border when my truck started making a terrible grinding noise. I barely made it to the next town before the engine died completely. The town was called Millbrook. Population maybe 300, according to the faded sign. One main street with a gas station, a diner, a general store, and a motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1975. The kind of place you pass through and forget immediately. I called a tow truck and was told the nearest mechanic wouldn't be able to look at my truck until morning. Great. An unexpected overnight stay in the middle of nowhere. I walked to the motel, a single-story building with peeling paint and a neon vacancy sign that flickered. The woman at the desk was maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back in a bun and a floral dress that matched the wallpaper. When I walked in, her face lit up. "Welcome back, Boston," she said warmly. "Been a while since we've seen you." I froze. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your usual room is ready. Number 7, just like always." "I think there's been a mistake. I've never been here before." She laughed like I'd told a joke. "Oh, you're funny. Still got that sense of humor." She pulled a key, an actual metal key, not a card, from the board behind her. "Here you go. You want me to put it on your tab?" "I don't have a tab. I've never been to this town." Her smile didn't waver, but something in her eyes shifted. "Of course you have, dear. You've been coming here twice a year since you were a boy. Your daddy used to bring you." My dad had been dead for 10 years, and we'd never traveled to Idaho together. "Ma'am, I think you have me confused with someone else." "Room 7, she repeated, pressing the key into my hand. "Dinner's at 6 if you want to join us at the diner. Wilson's been asking about you." I had no idea who Wilson was. I took the key, too tired and confused to argue further, and found room 7. It was exactly what you'd expect. Floral bedspread, wood paneling, a TV that probably got 3 channels. I locked the door, called my boss to explain the situation, and tried to relax. Around 5:30, I walked to the diner. The place was small, maybe 10 tables, with checkered floors and a counter with red vinyl stools. When I walked in, every head turned toward me. Boston. A man at the counter waved me over. He was in his 40s, wearing coveralls with the name Wilson stitched on the pocket. "Get over here, man. Where you been?" I approached slowly. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" He laughed and clapped me on the shoulder. "Still playing jokes, huh? Sit down, sit down. Marge, get this man his usual." The waitress, Marge, apparently, was already pouring coffee. "Denver, omelet, hash browns, wheat toast." "Right, Boston." That was actually my usual breakfast order, but I'd never told anyone here that. "How did you—" "Same thing you always get," she said, winking. "Never changes." I sat down, feeling increasingly unsettled. Wilson started talking about his garage, about some carburetor problem he'd been working on, asking my opinion like we'd had this conversation before. Other people in the diner kept glancing over, smiling, waving. An older man called out, "Good to see you, Boston. How's the road treating you?" I didn't know any of these people. After dinner, which I barely touched, I walked back to the motel. On the way, I passed the general store and saw something that made my blood run cold. In the window was a community board with photos, announcements, local news. And there, among the Little League team photos and church bake sale flyers, was a picture of a youth basketball team from 2003. 12 kids in uniforms, grinning at the camera. And there, second from the left in the front row, was a kid who looked exactly like me at age 12. Same face, same hair, same everything. Under the photo, names were listed. Boston Clark, Jeremy Mills, Danny Torres. Boston Clark. That was my name, my full name. But I'd never been to this town. I'd never played basketball here. That photo couldn't be me. I went back to my room and tore through my wallet, my phone, anything that could prove who I was and where I'd been. My driver's license was normal. Boston Clark, address in Seattle. My work ID, my credit cards, all normal. I called my best friend Riggs. "Hey man, where are you?" he answered. "Idaho. My truck broke down." "Riggs, have I ever been to a town called Millbrook?" "Millbrook. Isn't that where your grandparents lived?" My chest tightened. "What?" "Your mom's parents, right? You used to visit them summers when we were kids. You told me about it." "No, I didn't. My mom's parents lived in Portland." "Boston, are you okay? You definitely told me about Millbrook. You said you hated going there because it was boring." I hung up. This wasn't possible. I called my sister, Oakley. "Hey, what's up?" she answered. "Oakley, where did Mom's parents live?" "Grandma and Grandpa Mills, Millbrook, Idaho. Why?" "Grandpa Mills. Jeremy Mills from the photo." "Oakley, I'm in Millbrook right now, and everyone here acts like they know me. There's a photo of a kid who looks like me in a basketball uniform from 2003. But I've never been here. I swear to God, I've never been here." There was a long pause. "Boston, are you feeling okay? You spent every summer there from when you were like 6 until you were 16. You stopped going after Grandpa died." "That's not true." "It is true. I was jealous because you got to go and I had to stay home. You'd come back with stories about playing basketball and fishing and—" "Boston, why don't you remember?" I felt dizzy. This isn't real. This isn't... Maybe you should see a doctor. Are you having some kind of episode? I hung up and sat on the bed, trying to breathe. Either everyone in this town was gaslighting me, or I was losing my mind. I opened my photo gallery, scrolling back through years of pictures. There had to be proof that I'd never been here. But as I scrolled, I found them. Photos I didn't remember taking. Me, younger, standing in front of a general store that looked like the one on Main Street. Me with an older couple who must have been the Mills grandparents I didn't remember having. Me in a basketball uniform, holding a trophy. I dropped my phone. The memories didn't exist in my head, but they existed everywhere else. In photos, in other people's memories, in that community board. The town remembered me, even though I didn't remember it. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in room 7 waiting for morning so I could get my truck and leave. When dawn came, I walked to the mechanic's shop. Wilson was already there, working on my truck. "Morning, Boston. Good news. Just needed a new alternator. She's all ready to go." "How much do I owe you?" He waved me off. "Don't worry about it. You can settle up next time you're through. You know I trust you." I wanted to argue, wanted to insist on paying, but I just wanted to leave. I got in my truck and drove. I didn't stop until I was 3 towns over, where I pulled into a rest stop and tried to process what had happened. I called the motel in Millbrook from my cell. "Front desk," the woman answered. "This is Boston Clark. I stayed last night in room 7. "Of course. Did you forget something?" "No, I need to ask you something. How long have I been coming to your motel?" "Oh, let's see. Since you were a little boy with your grandpa. Must be 20 years or more. You always take room 7. It's like your second home." "What do I do when I visit? Who do I see?" "Well, you catch up with Wilson, have breakfast at Marge's. Sometimes you go fishing at the lake. You're part of the community, Boston. We all love having you here." My hands were shaking. If I'm part of the community, why don't I remember any of it? There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more mechanical. "The town remembers for you. That's how it works. You belong to Millbrook, Boston. You always have, and you'll come back. They always come back." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, trying to understand. Then I made more calls. I called my mom. She confirmed I'd spent summers in Millbrook with grandparents I didn't remember having. I called old school friends. They all remembered me talking about that little Idaho town. I searched for the town online and found sparse information, but there was a newspaper archive that mentioned a Boston Clark winning a youth fishing derby in 2005. The evidence was everywhere. The memories were everywhere. Except in my own head. I've been home in Seattle for 2 weeks now. I've been to 3 different doctors, and they all say the same thing. Sometimes trauma or stress can cause selective amnesia. They think I had some repressed memories from childhood. Maybe something bad happened in Millbrook, and my brain blocked it out. They're trying different treatments to help me recover the memories. But here's what terrifies me. I don't think the memories were blocked. I think they were created. Somehow, that town inserted itself into my history, into my past, into photographs and other people's minds. Everyone remembers me being there, except me. And the worst part, I keep thinking about going back. I'll be driving and realize I'm heading toward Idaho. I'll wake up from dreams about a general store and a diner and room 7 at a motel with peeling paint. The pull is getting stronger. Last night, I found a basketball trophy in my closet. First place, Millbrook Youth League, 2003. I don't remember putting it there. I don't remember winning it. But there's my name, engraved on a plaque. This morning, I got a postcard. No return address. A picture of a small town main street. On the back, in handwriting I don't recognize. "Missing you. Room 7 is waiting. The town." I threw it away. But I kept thinking about it. About Wilson and Marge and the motel clerk who smiled like she'd known me my whole life. About a grandfather I don't remember losing. About summers in a town I never visited that somehow remember me perfectly. The doctors say I should confront my past, that returning to Millbrook might help recover my memories. They don't understand. I don't want to recover memories I never had. I don't want to belong to a town that claims me like property. But the pull is getting stronger. I dream about that main street. I wake up tasting Marge's coffee. I catch myself planning the drive route. Oakley called yesterday. "Have you thought about visiting Millbrook?" she asked. "Maybe seeing the old places would help." Why would I go there? Because it's part of you. Because Grandpa would want you to remember him. I'd shown her photos of the grandparents she claims I had. She cried, talking about how much Grandpa Mills loved me, how he taught me to fish, how heartbroken he was when I stopped visiting. She remembers things that never happened. But her grief is real. The town rewrote my history, but it made that history real for everyone else. And now it's calling me back to live the life it created for me, to fill in the blank spaces in my own memory with experiences everyone else swears I had. I'm terrified that if I go back, I'll start remembering too, that the false memories will overwrite my real ones, that I'll become the Boston Clark who grew up summers in Millbrook, who has room 7 waiting for him, who belongs to a town that claims its children and never lets them go. My truck is in the driveway. My bag is half packed. I keep telling myself I won't go, but every day the pull gets stronger, and every day I remember less about why I'm resisting. If you're reading this, if anyone finds this journal, know that I didn't want to go back, but I think I'm going to. Not because I want to, but because apparently I've been going there my whole life, and everyone knows it except me. The town remembers, and soon I think I will too. God help me, I'm starting to want to remember. When you hear your own voice calling to you from the darkness, every instinct tells you not to answer. I answered anyway. My name is Imani, and I'm a geology student at the University of Washington. Last April, I went on a field trip to explore the Ape Cave lava tubes near Mount St. Helens with 2 classmates, Azael and Cecilia. We were studying volcanic formations for our senior thesis. An Ape Cave is one of the longest lava tube caves in North America. Over 2 miles of underground passages formed by ancient lava flows. The main sections are well-traveled and relatively safe, but there are side passages and unexplored areas that most tourists never see. Our professor had given us permission to explore some of the less-traveled sections, as long as we stayed together and followed safety protocols. We had helmets, headlamps, extra batteries, rope, and emergency supplies. We'd been caving before. We thought we were prepared. The main tube is massive. In some places, you can stand up straight with room to spare. We'd been walking for about 40 minutes, taking measurements and photographs, when Azael noticed a narrow side passage we hadn't seen on any of the maps. It was maybe 3 feet wide, heading off at an angle from the main tube. "Should we check it out?" he asked, shining his light into the opening. Cecilia shook her head. "We're supposed to stay on the main route." But I was curious. The whole point of the trip was to study formations that weren't in textbooks. Just a quick look. 10 minutes, then we come back. We squeezed into the side passage single file, me first, then Azael, then Cecilia. The tunnel was tight, the walls rough volcanic rock that scraped our shoulders as we moved. Our headlamps created crazy shadows that danced across the uneven surfaces. After about 50 feet, the passage opened into a small chamber, maybe 15 feet across. And that's where it got strange. The chamber was perfectly circular, not naturally formed. Lava tubes are chaotic, irregular. But this was a perfect circle, with smooth walls that didn't match the rough texture of the rest of the cave. In the center of the floor was a hole, maybe 2 feet in diameter, dropping straight down into darkness. "This doesn't make sense," I said, running my hand along the smooth wall. "This isn't a natural formation." Azael knelt by the hole, shining his light down. "I can't see the bottom. Must be deep." That's when we heard it. A voice, faint and distant, coming from the hole. My voice. "Help me," it said. "I'm down here. Please help me." The 3 of us froze, staring at the opening. "That's not possible," Cecilia whispered. "That sounded like me," I finished. That was my voice. "Imani," the voice called again from below, clearer now. "Can you hear me? I fell. I need help. Please." My hands were shaking. I leaned closer to the hole, my heart pounding. "Hello?" "Thank God," my voice responded. "I've been down here for hours. I thought no one would find me. Can you throw down a rope?" Azael grabbed my arm. "Don't. Something's wrong. You're right here. That can't be you down there." "But it sounds exactly like me." "Exactly," he said. Too exactly like a recording. We stood there, trying to process it. The voice called again, more urgent now. Imani, are you still there? Please don't leave me. It's so dark down here. I'm scared. Cecilia's face was pale in the headlamp light. We need to leave, right now. But I couldn't move. Hearing my own voice, scared and desperate, begging for help, it was like some primal part of my brain couldn't reconcile that I was safe when I sounded so terrified. What if someone else fell down there? I said. What if there's actually someone who needs help? Then why do they sound like you? Azael demanded. Imani, please. The voice was crying now. I can hear you talking. Why won't you help me? I'm hurt. I think my leg is broken, please. I pulled a small rock from my pocket, a sample I'd collected earlier, and dropped it into the hole. We listened. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. No sound of it hitting bottom. That hole is impossibly deep, Cecilia said. Nothing natural goes down that far. We need to leave now. But as we turned to go back through the passage, we heard something else. Footsteps. Coming from the tunnel we'd just come through. Slow, deliberate footsteps getting closer. Someone else is here, Azael whispered. We killed our headlamps and pressed against the wall, waiting in complete darkness. The footsteps entered the circular chamber, and we heard breathing. Heavy, wet breathing that echoed off the smooth walls. Then a light appeared. A headlamp, but not like ours. The beam was wrong, too wide and too bright, illuminating the entire chamber. And in that light, we saw who was carrying it. It was me. Standing in the entrance to the chamber was another version of me, wearing the same clothes, the same equipment, same everything. She looked around the room with a confused expression, like she'd just arrived and didn't know where she was. The three of us stood frozen against the wall, our lights off, barely breathing. The other me walked slowly around the chamber, examining the walls just as I had done. She approached the hole in the floor and knelt beside it, just as Azael had done. And then, from deep in the hole, we heard Azael's voice. Help me. I'm down here. Please help me. The other me called down into the hole. Hello? Who's there? Azael, the voice responded. I fell. I need help. She turned around, looking confused, and that's when her headlamp beam passed over where we were standing. For just a second, we made eye contact. Me and the other me. Her eyes went wide, and she opened her mouth to scream. But before any sound came out, she flickered, like a hologram losing power. Her image distorted, stretched, and then she was gone. Just vanished, leaving only her headlamp falling to the ground with a clatter. From the hole, multiple voices started calling. My voice, Azael's voice, Cecilia's voice, all talking over each other, all begging for help, all claiming to have fallen and be trapped below. Run, Cecilia said. We sprinted back through the narrow passage, our headlamps bouncing wildly, scraping our shoulders and arms on the rough walls in our panic. Behind us, we could hear the voices changing. They weren't calling for help anymore. They were laughing. Dozens of voices, all ours, laughing in perfect unison, the sound echoing through the tunnels. We burst back into the main tube and kept running. But something was wrong. The main tube looked different. The walls were smooth like the circular chamber had been. And ahead of us, we could see lights, headlamps, people. We ran toward them, desperate for help, for other people, for safety. As we got closer, we could see 3 figures standing in the tunnel ahead. It was us, 3 people who looked exactly like Azael, Cecilia, and me, standing motionless in the tunnel, staring in our direction. This isn't real, Azael said, his voice shaking. This can't be real. The copies of us didn't move, just stood there, watching, waiting. Cecilia grabbed my hand. We have to go back. Maybe there's another way out. We turned around, but behind us stood 3 more copies. Then 3 more appeared from a side passage. Then 3 more. We were surrounded by ourselves. They all moved at once, stepping forward in perfect synchronization. Their faces were blank, emotionless. They didn't speak, didn't make any sound except for their footsteps echoing in harmony. The hole, I said suddenly. The hole in the chamber. What if that's the way out? That hole goes down forever, Azel said. We dropped a rock and never heard it land. But maybe that's the point. Maybe down is the only way out of this place. We ran back toward the side passage, the copies following us with mechanical precision. We squeezed through the narrow tunnel, harder now because there were dozens of hands grabbing at us, all wearing our own faces, all reaching and pulling. We made it back to the circular chamber. The hole in the center seemed darker now, deeper, like it was pulling light into it. From below, our voices continued calling, but the words had become nonsense, just sounds that mimicked speech without meaning. We have to jump, I said. Are you insane? Cecilia screamed. We don't know what's down there. We know what's here, I shot back. The copies were filling the chamber, pouring in from the passage, surrounding us. Azel looked at the hole, then at me, then at the approaching copies. Together, he said. On 3. 1, 2. Cecilia's voice was barely a whisper. 3. We jumped into the hole. I expected to fall forever. I expected to hit water or rocks or nothing at all. Instead, we fell for maybe 5 seconds before landing on something soft and yielding. Not ground. It felt like landing on a mattress or foam. We were in complete darkness, our headlamps somehow not working. Then light appeared above us, not from our lamps, but from somewhere else. The hole we'd jumped through was visible above, a perfect circle of dim light. And through that circle, we could see the copies of ourselves, standing at the edge, looking down at us. They didn't follow. They just watched as the hole grew smaller and smaller, shrinking until it was gone completely, leaving us in total darkness. Where are we? Cecilia asked. I don't know, I said, but we're not in the cave anymore. We felt around in the darkness. The surface beneath us was smooth and warm, almost organic. The air smelled wrong, not like cave air, which is cold and minerally, but like something living, like breath. Our headlamps suddenly flickered back to life. We were in a chamber, but not like any cave formation I'd ever seen. The walls were ribbed and curved, pulsing slightly as if breathing. The ceiling was low, maybe 6 feet high, and covered in what looked like veins or roots, all pulsing with a dim bioluminescent glow. This is impossible, Azel whispered. A sound came from ahead of us, a wet sliding sound. In the dim light we saw movement, something large, pulling itself along the ribbed floor toward us. It had our faces. All of our faces merged together into something that wasn't quite human. It moved on too many limbs, each one ending in hands that looked familiar. Our hands. What is it? Cecilia sobbed. I said slowly, I think it's what we would have become if we'd stayed up there, if we'd let those copies catch us. The thing opened mouths, multiple mouths, all in wrong places, and spoke with our voices layered over each other. You chose wrong, you chose down, now you're here, now you're ours. It lunged forward, faster than something that size should move. We scattered, running in different directions through passages that branched off from the central chamber. I ran blindly, my headlamp showing glimpses of walls that moved and breathed, of shapes in the shadows that might have been rocks or might have been something watching me. I don't know how long I ran. Time felt wrong in that place, elastic and meaningless. Eventually, I saw light ahead, real light, not bioluminescence, and ran toward it. I burst out of a cave opening into bright afternoon sunshine. I was outside, standing on the slope of Mount St. Helens, gasping and crying and covered in volcanic dust. Behind me was just a normal cave entrance. No ribbed walls, no pulsing veins, just rock. I heard voices and turned to see park rangers running toward me. They'd been searching for us for 3 days. 3 days, though it had felt like hours in the cave. They found Azel 2 hours later, emerging from a different cave entrance half a mile away. He couldn't speak for 2 days after. When he finally could, all he'd say was, "We went down. We had to go down." They never found Cecilia. Search teams explored every inch of Ape Cave and the surrounding lava tubes. They found the side passage we'd entered, but it only went back 30 feet before ending in the solid rock. No circular chamber, no hole, no smooth walls. The official report says we got separated in the cave system, that Cecilia must have fallen into an unexplored shaft, that we were disoriented and dehydrated and imagined most of what we described. But I know what I saw. I know what we found in that cave. And I know that Cecilia made a different choice when that thing came for us. She ran a different direction, and wherever she ended up, it wasn't here. Sometimes, late at night, I hear my phone ring. I answer it, and there's breathing on the other end. Wet, heavy breathing. And then very faintly, I hear my own voice calling from somewhere far away. Imani, can you hear me? I'm still here. Come back and help me. I always hang up, but the calls keep coming. And the worst part, sometimes I want to answer. Sometimes I want to go back to Mount St. Helens, find that cave entrance, and go looking for that side passage that doesn't exist on any map, because somewhere in the dark, something is still calling my name with my own voice. And somewhere even deeper, I think Cecilia is still running, still trying to find a way out. But there is no out, only down, always down. The cave remembers us, and it's still hungry. The alert came through at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in December. By Wednesday morning, everyone was pretending it never happened. My name is Stephanie, and I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Eugene, Oregon. I'm a high school history teacher, 32 years old, boring life, nothing unusual ever happens to me. Until that night. I was grading papers in my living room, half watching some cooking show on TV, when every screen in my house started blaring. My TV, my phone, my laptop, all simultaneously switched to the same emergency broadcast alert. That harsh, jarring tone that makes your heart jump, followed by a robotic voice. But this wasn't a test, and it wasn't a weather warning. The message was specific. Emergency alert for Lane County residents. Remain indoors. Lock all doors and windows immediately. Do not look outside. Do not respond to anyone claiming to be authorities. Do not open your door for any reason. This is not a drill. Further instructions to follow. Then the screens went back to normal programming like nothing had happened. I sat there, papers scattered on my lap, staring at my TV. What the hell was that? I grabbed my phone to call my sister, but before I could dial, I heard it. Helicopters. Multiple helicopters, low and loud, directly overhead. I went to the window and pulled back the curtain. The night sky was crisscrossed with searchlights. At least 4 helicopters circling the area in a coordinated pattern. I could see the lights sweeping across houses, backyards, the street. My phone rang. It was my neighbor, Leonard, an elderly man who lived 2 houses down. Stephanie, are you seeing this? His voice was shaking. The helicopters. Yes. Did you get that emergency alert? I did. What do you think is happening? I don't know, but maybe we should do what it said. Lock everything and stay inside. Should I call 911? The alert said not to respond to anyone claiming to be authorities. Maybe wait and see what... The call cut off. Not like he hung up. It just went dead. I tried calling back, but the call wouldn't connect. I tried my sister, my parents, 3 other friends. Nothing. Cell service was completely down. I checked my doors and windows, making sure everything was locked. The searchlights kept sweeping past, and I could hear the helicopters moving in a grid pattern, methodical and thorough. Like they were looking for something, or someone. Around midnight, I heard vehicles on my street, lots of them. I peeked through the curtains and saw unmarked black SUVs parked at intervals along the road. People in tactical gear were moving between houses, checking yards, shining flashlights into bushes and under cars. They weren't police. No markings, no uniforms I recognized, just black gear and those bright tactical flashlights. I ducked away from the window, heart pounding. The alert said, don't respond to anyone claiming to be authorities. Were these the people it was warning about? Or were they looking? for whoever the warning was about. Someone knocked on my door, 3 sharp knocks, official sounding. I froze. "Ma'am, this is a safety check. Please open your door." A man's voice, calm and professional. I didn't answer. "Ma'am, we need to verify that you're safe. Please open the door." The alert had been clear. Don't open your door for any reason. "I'm fine," I called out. "I'm staying inside like the alert said." Silence. Then, "What alert?" My blood went cold. "The emergency broadcast, about an hour ago." More silence. Then footsteps walking away from my door. I heard radio chatter, too quiet to make out words. Then the footsteps came back. "Ma'am, there was no emergency alert. We're conducting a routine safety check due to reports of suspicious activity in the area. Please open your door so we can verify your well-being." "I'm not opening the door. The alert told me not to." "Ma'am, I'm telling you there was no alert. If you don't open this door, we'll have to force entry for your safety." I backed away from the door, phone clutched in my hand even though it was useless. Were they lying about the alert? Or was I losing my mind? The doorknob rattled. Someone was trying to open it. My deadbolt held, but they were testing it, seeing how secure it was. Then, abruptly, the rattling stopped. I heard urgent radio chatter and the sound of people running. The helicopters changed their pattern, all converging on an area a few blocks away. Searchlights focused on one spot, and I heard shouting in the distance. I stayed away from the windows, huddled in my hallway, listening. For the next 2 hours, there was chaos outside. More vehicles, more helicopters. What sounded like gunfire at one point, though I couldn't be sure. The activity was intense and coordinated, like a military operation happening in my quiet suburban neighborhood. Around 3 a.m., everything stopped. The helicopters left. The vehicles drove away. The searchlights disappeared. Silence returned, broken only by the normal night sounds of a sleeping neighborhood. I didn't sleep. I sat in my hallway until sunrise, watching the light creep through my windows, waiting for something else to happen. When morning came, everything looked normal. Birds were singing, cars were starting up for morning commutes. I looked out my window and saw Leonard getting his newspaper from his driveway, like it was any other Wednesday morning. My cell service was back. I immediately called him. "Leonard, are you okay?" "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" "Last night. The helicopters, the people in tactical gear." "What are you talking about?" "We talked on the phone about it. Around midnight. Stephanie, I was asleep by 10 last night. I didn't call you." "But you did. We talked about the emergency alert and the helicopters." "There were no helicopters." "What emergency alert?" I felt dizzy. "You're joking, right? This is some kind of prank." "I don't know what you're talking about. Are you feeling all right? You sound stressed." I hung up and called my sister. "Did you get an emergency alert last night?" "No. Why?" "Are you sure? Around 11:47 p.m. "Stephanie, I was asleep. What's going on?" I turned on the news. Local channels, national channels, weather channels, nothing. No mention of any emergency in Lane County. No reports of helicopter activity. No alerts. I searched online. Every local news site, social media, everything. Nothing. I checked my phone's notification history. The emergency alert wasn't there. I checked my TV's alert log. Nothing. I checked my laptop's browser history to see if I'd looked up the alert message. No record. It was like it had never happened. But I remembered it. I remembered every detail, the message, the helicopters, the searchlights, Leonard calling me, the man at my door. All of it was vivid and real. I went outside. My street looked completely normal. I walked down to Leonard's house. He was watering his plants, and when he saw me, he smiled and waved like everything was fine. "Morning, Stephanie." "Leonard, please. Last night..." "You already asked about that. I told you nothing happened. Are you sure you're feeling okay?" I looked at the street, at the houses, searching for any sign of the previous night's activity. Tire tracks from all those vehicles. Footprints in yards from the tactical teams. Anything. Nothing. The street was pristine. Over the next week, I tried to find anyone else who remembered that night. I asked neighbors, posted on local Facebook groups, called the county emergency services to ask about alerts sent that night. Everyone gave me the same response. Nothing happened. There was no alert, no helicopters, no activity. But I found one thing that proved I wasn't crazy. I'd been grading papers that night, and in my panic, I dropped them all over the floor. When I picked them up the next morning, one of them had a boot print on it. A tactical boot print clear as day, from someone stepping on it while I had them scattered on the floor near my door. That paper is the only physical evidence that something happened. I've kept it, photographed it, measured it. The boot print is real. It exists. Whatever happened that night, someone in tactical gear was in my house or very close to my door. I've tried filing reports, but no one takes me seriously. The police suggested I see a therapist. The county says there's no record of any emergency alert. The local news won't return my calls. 2 weeks after the incident, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Heavy breathing. Then a robotic voice, like the emergency alert. You followed instructions. Good. Do not speak of this. Do not investigate further. What you witnessed was classified. Forget it happened. This is your only warning. The call disconnected. I haven't told anyone else about it since. I stopped posting on Facebook, stopped asking neighbors, stopped calling authorities. Because whatever happened, that night was real, and someone went through a lot of effort to erase it from existence, and they know I remember. Sometimes late at night, I hear helicopters. I check the news the next morning. Nothing. I ask neighbors. No one heard anything. But I know they were there. I know because I find small things moved in my yard, a trash can repositioned, a garden tool I left by the fence now on my porch, little signs that someone was there, checking, watching, reminding me that they know where I live. Last month, I saw something on my doorbell camera footage. At 3 a.m., a figure in tactical gear walked up to my door, looked directly at the camera, and held up a sign. It said, "Forget." Then they turned and walked away. The footage was deleted from my camera's cloud storage by morning, but I downloaded it to my computer first. I have proof. I have evidence that something happened, that people are watching me, that the emergency alert was real, but I can't show anyone. Because the last thing the robotic voice said was, "This is your only warning." And I don't know what happens if I ignore a warning like that. So I go to work. I grade papers. I live my normal, boring life. And every night, I lock my doors and windows. I close my curtains. And I wait to see if the alert will come again. Because whatever they were looking for that night, I don't think they found it. The operation ended too suddenly, too incompletely. They're still searching, and I'm still watching. The emergency broadcast was real. Something happened in Lane County in December that everyone has been made to forget or deny. Everyone except me. And I think that's exactly what scares them. My sister's face stared up at me from the twisted fabric, but she disappeared years ago. The note in her handwriting said, "I'm still here. Stop looking." My name is Raina, and my little sister Brinley vanished 5 years ago somewhere in Central Oregon. It happened during a camping trip with college friends. She never made it back to her tent after going to brush her teeth at dusk. Search teams combed the woods for days. News stations ran her photo for weeks. My parents never stopped hoping, but after the first year, I knew she was gone for good. Grief became a strange roommate, always around, never speaking. I spent 2 years breaking down every possibility. Did Brinley wander off, meet a stranger, get lost, get tired of life? Once the case went cold, I forced myself to move forward. You can't mourn in a vacuum forever, or so I thought. Last August, I was hiking Eagle Creek Trail in the Columbia River Gorge, around 200 miles from where Brinley vanished. It was supposed to be a distraction, a beautiful day out. The trail was crowded with summer backpackers, the waterfalls roaring after weeks of rain. I was halfway up the trail, moving fast so I'd be alone between groups, when I spotted something hanging from a tree branch overhanging the path. It was a red windbreaker, Brinley's jacket. I froze, heart pounding as if I'd seen a ghost. The jacket was unmistakable. She'd customized it with stitched vines and embroidered her name inside the collar with tiny Arctic foxes. I staggered to the tree, convinced I was hallucinating. Her name was there, clear as day, as was a small folded note. "I'm still here. Stop looking." The handwriting was Brinley's, uniquely casual, looping B and an M so messy nobody but her understood it. The date on the note was 3 days ago. I scanned the area for cameras, pranksters, anything explaining how this could be possible. No one was nearby. Adrenaline pushed me into angry action. I called the police, then my parents. Both said it was probably someone playing a cruel joke. News coverage meant her photo and details were public, even her signature on birth announcements. But I knew better. The little drawing at the bottom of the note, a fox holding a heart, was a secret image Brinley only used for me. I finished the hike numb, police promising to look into it, but I knew nobody would chase a lead this thin. After that, I started returning to the trail every weekend, looking for something, anything. On my third visit, there was another note, tucked into an empty water bottle wedged in the same tree's roots. "Look for me if you want, but it's better if you don't," in Brinley's handwriting, dated the day before. There was a coded riddle on the back, about a memory from our childhood. Police grew suspicious, thinking I might be fabricating evidence. Even my parents, desperate for closure, refused to believe. But my sister was out there, somewhere. Over several weeks, I found 5 more notes. Each appeared after hikes, never when I waited and watched, always with small details only Brinley would know. Inside jokes, exact dates of family events, phrases from books we read as kids. They were all dated within 48 hours or less, no matter when I'd last visited. Always recent. Always telling me, gently or urgently, to stop. But why? Was she in hiding? Was someone with her? The handwriting never changed. The fox and heart emblem was always present. I started documenting everything, cross-checking the dates and my hiking patterns. It seemed impossible that anyone could predict precisely when I'd pass a particular mile marker, or how I'd take a particular turn, or remember these secrets if they were trying to trick me. The police finally conceded the notes weren't standard pranks and ran forensic tests, ink, fiber, fingerprints. Every test came back inconclusive except one. The DNA on the jacket matched Brinley. For a week after that, detectives took my story seriously. But then, a month later, I found another note, tucked under a stone at a trail intersection. "Stop now. You won't find me. I'm not what you remember." It felt colder than the earlier notes. The handwriting was even messier, the words rougher. It was dated that very morning, though I'd arrived at sunrise. My sleep started to slip. Every shadow at home seemed longer. I wondered if someone was stalking me, using Brinley's story as psychological bait. But the notes persisted, and the messages grew stranger, dropping hints about secrets I'd never shared, or memories I'd repressed. Uncomfortable childhood moments, odd encounters on past family vacations, details Brinley couldn't have known unless she was out there, watching somehow. After weeks of collecting notes, I went to the trail one evening when the area was nearly deserted. I hid off path and waited for hours, desperate to catch someone in the act. Nothing happened until dusk, when I heard the quiet rustle of footsteps and a soft whistle that sounded like Brinley's call for our childhood dog. I held my breath, heart exploding in fear and hope. The sound circled the trail, faded away. Instead of relief, I felt overwhelming dread. Later, when I emerged from my hiding place, a fresh note was tucked under my car windshield wiper. "Remember the waterfall? You fell. I caught you." Those exact words. My sister saved me from drowning when I was 6. At home, things turned worse. The notes continued, but they started appearing outside my apartment, attached to my door, In my mailbox, always recent dates, always urging me to stop. Once, a folded slip fell out of my coat pocket at work with the message, "Go back. You belong on the trail." Nobody saw who left it. At one point, my sleep-deprived mind convinced me maybe Brinley was dead, her ghost leaving these notes as a way to comfort or warn me. I tried burning one, but the ink didn't melt as expected. It smudged, then seemed to reappear when I checked the ashes the next day. A therapist suggested these were symptoms of trauma or psychosis, but each note was physical, unique, real. Even my therapist agreed it was no ordinary fixation. Finally, I broke down and begged my parents to join me for a hike, showing them the latest notes and jacket. My mom cried for hours. My dad cycled between anger and silent confusion. On our joint hike, we found nothing, but at dinner that night, my mother found a note in her purse. "Be happy. I'm safe. Please let me go." Dad found one later in his car. "You did your best. Don't blame yourself." The next day, 2 detectives visited. A new note had turned up at the police station addressed to them, again with a recent date and the fox emblem. That was the point when everybody finally believed me. Something inexplicable was happening. But the relief didn't last. Each new message grew less personal and more desperate, repeating the theme, "Stop looking." Months passed. I stopped hiking, but notes continued to appear in my home, at family gatherings, even in books Brinley loved, tucked between pages I'd never opened before. One night, I fell asleep holding a letter begging Brinley to come home. When I woke up, a note was pinned to my pillow. "If you want to see me, you have to let go." What choice did I have? Eventually, I accepted that maybe my sister wasn't gone, not in the way we thought. Maybe she'd found somewhere between missing and lost, somewhere I couldn't follow. A new life, another reality, or something else entirely. Maybe she was protecting me, or herself, from the dangers her disappearance had created. Maybe she was warning me, "Stop searching, or something worse will find me." I burned every note, donated her jacket to charity, packed away photos in a box. Life felt emptier, but less haunted. The trail still called me back, but I ignored it. Then last week, I found one final note tucked under my front mat. "Thank you. Keep going. I love you." I don't know if I'll ever understand what really happened to Brinley, or who, or what, was leaving those notes. Was it her, or something else that learned to mimic her handwriting and voice? Was it a person, a ghost, a consequence of grief powerful enough to shape reality? Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is I finally let her go, even if she's out in those woods, somewhere on a trail she never hiked. Sometimes, late at night, I dream of her. She's always waiting just out of sight, calling to me with her gentle whistle, surrounded by foxes and waterfalls, always just beyond reach, always telling me gently, "Stop looking. You're safe." But in the morning, I wake up, sometimes with a new note, sometimes not. And I walk forward, knowing that loving someone who vanished means listening, even to warnings that come in her handwriting. There's no perfect ending, no closure, just the hope that the trail won't call me back again. The smoke turned the sky orange, and the evacuation order said we had 30 minutes. 6 hours later, we still hadn't found a road that existed on any map. My name is Ari, and I'm a nurse working at a rural hospital in eastern Washington. Last March, during an unusually dry spring, wildfires broke out across the region faster than anyone predicted. I was finishing a shift when the evacuation alarms went off. Not a drill, not a warning, but a mandatory immediate evacuation. The fire was moving at unprecedented speed, jumping containment lines, heading straight for our town. I grabbed my bag and ran to the parking lot with maybe 20 other hospital staff and patients who could walk. The air was thick with smoke, ash falling like snow, the sun a dim red circle behind the haze. Emergency vehicles were already streaming past, sirens wailing, directing everyone toward Highway 23 heading west. the only evacuation route out of the valley. I got in my car and joined the convoy. There were maybe 30 vehicles ahead of me, another dozen behind, a mix of cars, trucks, an ambulance, even a school bus that must have been picking up stranded residents. We moved as a group, headlights on in the unnatural twilight, following the highway markers and the flashing lights of police vehicles leading the way. The fire was visible on the eastern ridgeline, a wall of orange flame consuming everything in its path. The heat was intense even from miles away, and embers were starting to fall around us, some as large as my fist. Everyone drove faster, desperation overriding caution. Then everything changed. We'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when the convoy entered a stretch of highway that cut through dense forest. The smoke got thicker, visibility dropping to maybe 50 feet. The trees on either side were massive, old-growth pines that seemed to press in on the road. I kept my eyes on the taillights of the truck in front of me, trusting that whoever was leading knew where they were going. When we emerged from the smoke, nothing was right. The highway we were on didn't look like Highway 23 anymore. The pavement was older, cracked, with vegetation growing through it. The trees surrounding us were different. Not the pines we'd just driven through, but twisted, deciduous trees I didn't recognize, their branches bare despite it being spring. And most disturbing, there were no other evacuation vehicles ahead or behind us anymore. Our convoy of 30-plus vehicles was now maybe 8 cars, all of us slowing down in confusion. I could see people in other cars looking around, phones out, trying to figure out where we were. I checked my phone. No signal. My GPS showed nothing but a gray screen with no location found. The road stretched ahead through the strange forest, and behind us the smoke had become a solid wall, obscuring everything we'd just driven through. The lid vehicle, a police SUV, pulled over, and we all followed. An officer got out, a woman I recognized from town named Charlie, and she looked as confused as the rest of us. A small group gathered around her. "Where are we?" someone asked. "I don't know," Charlie admitted. "This isn't Highway 23. This isn't any road I know." "How is that possible? We were just following the evacuation route." "I know, but look around. Does any of this look familiar?" It didn't. The landscape was wrong. Eastern Washington in March should be rolling hills of grassland and pine forests. This was something else. Flat terrain, strange trees, a gray sky that didn't look like smoke but like perpetual overcast. And it was quiet. No birds, no wind, no distant sounds of the fire we'd been fleeing. Just eerie silence. "My phone won't work," someone said. Others confirmed the same. No cell service, no GPS, nothing. It was like we'd driven into a dead zone. "We need to keep moving," another man, I heard someone call him Cal, suggested. "We can't go back through that smoke, and we can't stay here. Maybe if we follow this road, we'll hit a town or find our way back." It seemed like the only option. We got back in our vehicles and continued down the strange road, staying close together now, nobody wanting to be separated from the group. The lead police SUV set a slow pace, maybe 30 miles per hour, everyone scanning for landmarks or road signs. We drove for what felt like an hour, though time seemed elastic in that place. The landscape never changed, just endless flat terrain with those twisted trees. No houses, no buildings, no intersections, just the one road stretching ahead and behind. Then we saw the town. It appeared suddenly as we crested a small rise. A cluster of buildings, maybe a quarter mile ahead. Old buildings like something from the early 1900s with wooden storefronts and dirt streets. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, suggesting people, but there were no cars, no power lines, no modern anything. "What the hell is this?" someone said over a walkie-talkie that Charlie had distributed to a few of us. We drove slowly into the town, pulling up in what looked like the main square. The buildings were weathered but structurally sound. A general store, a saloon, what might have been a post office. But everything felt wrong, too quiet, too still, like a movie set waiting for actors. We got out of our vehicles, staying in a tight group. Charlie had her hand on her service weapon, though she hadn't drawn it. The 8 vehicles worth of people, maybe 20 of us total, moved together through the empty streets. "Hello?" Cal called out. "Is anyone here? We need help. We're evacuating from a wildfire." No response. We checked the buildings. They were furnished, stocked even. The general store had goods on shelves. The saloon had bottles behind the bar. But no people. No signs of recent occupation. Everything was dusty, untouched but not abandoned. It felt staged. In the post office, I found something that made my blood run cold. A calendar on the wall, hanging open to March 1952, 73 years ago. Below it, a newspaper, the Eastern Washington Herald, dated March 15, 1952, with a headline about a forest fire approaching the valley. "Guys," I called out, "you need to see this." The group gathered around. The newspaper described a fire exactly like the one we'd just fled, an evacuation order, a convoy of vehicles taking Highway 23 west. The article ended mid-sentence, unfinished, like whoever was writing it had to leave suddenly. "This is a sick joke," someone said, but their voice lacked conviction. Charlie found more newspapers in other buildings, all from March 1952, all describing the same fire, the same evacuation. In one, we found a photograph, a grainy black and white image of a group of vehicles on a road. The make and model were different from ours, of course, but the composition was eerily similar. A convoy of people fleeing a fire. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now." Everyone agreed. Whatever this place was, whether we'd somehow driven into a time loop, an alternate dimension, or something else entirely, we didn't want to stay. We ran back to our vehicles and continued down the road, leaving the ghost town behind. But now, things got worse. The road started branching. Intersections appeared where there had been none before, each path looking identical. Same cracked pavement, same twisted trees. Charlie made decisions at random, choosing left or right based on gut instinct. Sometimes we'd drive for 10 minutes and end up back at the ghost town. Other times, we'd emerge into clearings with structures, rusted vehicles from different eras, a crashed airplane that looked decades old, a modern semi-truck sitting abandoned with its cargo still loaded. We stopped at the semi-truck. The driver's door was open, keys still in the ignition. In the cab, we found a logbook. The last entry was dated 2 years ago. Detoured due to wildfire, following emergency route. Where the hell am I? "We're not the first," Charlie said quietly. "People have been getting lost here for years, maybe decades." That realization broke something in the group. Some people started crying. Others got angry, demanding answers Charlie couldn't provide. Cal suggested we try driving back the way we came, retracing our exact path. We tried. After an hour of careful backtracking, we ended up at the same ghost town again. Time became meaningless. We drove for what might have been hours or days. Our watches all showed different times, none of which made sense. Hunger and thirst became issues. We rationed the food and water people had grabbed during evacuation, sharing supplies. The vehicles needed gas, but their tanks never seemed to empty, as if this place had different rules. People started seeing things in the trees, figures watching us, shapes moving parallel to our convoy. Nobody could agree on what they were. Some said they looked human. Others said definitely not. Then, during one of our stops to redistribute supplies, I noticed something. The smoke wall we'd driven through at the beginning, it was always visible on the horizon, no matter which direction we'd driven. It formed a complete circle around us, a boundary we couldn't cross. "We drove into something," I said. "Some kind of trap or anomaly. The fire was just the catalyst. This place, it collects evacuees." "Then how do we get out?" someone asked. Nobody had an answer. We were discussing our dwindling options when Cal noticed something. His car's analog clock, the only timepiece that had kept working consistently, was running backward. Slowly, but definitely backward. As we watched, other clocks and other vehicles started doing the same. "Time is reversing," Charlie said. "Or trying to." An idea formed. What if we have to go back to exactly when we arrived? What if this place operates on a loop and we need to be at the entry point at the exact moment we came through? It was desperate, but we had nothing else. Using Cal's backward-running clock as a guide, we calculated when we'd have approximately 6 hours before arriving and drove back toward where we thought we'd first entered, the smoke wall at the edge of the ghost town. As Cal's clock approached the time we'd entered, running backward, we drove straight at the smoke wall as a group, all 8 vehicles in tight formation. The impact felt like driving through a membrane. Resistance, then sudden release. We burst out onto Highway 23, sirens wailing around us, the evacuation convoy surrounding us again, vehicles ahead and behind, just as there had been at the start. The smoke was the same, the fire visible on the ridge, the emergency vehicles leading the way. Nobody in the other vehicles reacted to us like we'd been missing. To them, we'd never left. We completed the evacuation, made it to the shelter. 6 hours had passed since the evacuation started. Exactly 6 hours, according to official records. When I tried to tell authorities what happened, Cal and Charlie stopped me. "They'll never believe us," Charlie said. "And maybe it's better that way." The 8 of us who went through it stay in touch. We don't talk about it often, but we remember. And sometimes, when wildfires break out and evacuation orders are issued, we wonder, how many vehicles disappear? How many convoys take a wrong turn into smoke and never find their way back? We were lucky. We figured out the loop, but that ghost town is still there, somewhere between the smoke and the real world, waiting for the next group of evacuees who take the wrong road at the wrong time. If you ever find yourself evacuating from a wildfire and the world around you suddenly feels wrong, the trees change, the road looks different, time stops making sense, turn back immediately. Don't keep driving. Don't trust that the smoke will clear, because some roads don't lead to safety. They lead to places that exist outside normal time and space, places that collect the lost and the desperate. We got out. But we left something behind. Hours of our lives that don't exist in any official record, memories of a town that shouldn't be real, and the knowledge that not everyone who evacuates actually escapes. The fire still burns somewhere in that place, eternal and hungry, and the road still waits. I bought the property to get away from people. Turns out, I wasn't alone out there. My name is Eliseo, and I'm a software developer who works remotely. Last July, I bought 40 acres of forested land in the Cascade Range of Washington, about 2 hours from Seattle. The property came with a small cabin that needed work, but it was perfect for what I wanted. Total isolation, no neighbors within miles, just me and the woods. I'd spend weekdays working from the cabin and weekends fixing it up, hiking my land, enjoying the peace. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I started noticing small things going missing from my porch. Nothing valuable. A dish towel, a coffee mug, a pair of work gloves I'd left on the railing. I figured it was ravens, or maybe a pack rat. Animals do weird things. I didn't think much of it. Then I found the structure. I was hiking the western edge of my property, an area I hadn't explored yet because it was dense with undergrowth and fallen trees. I came across a clearing I didn't remember seeing on the survey maps, maybe 30 feet across. And in the center of that clearing was something that made me stop dead. It was built from branches, carefully arranged and interwoven to form a kind of shelter or lean-to, about 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. But it wasn't random. The construction was deliberate, almost architectural. The branches were sorted by size. The structure had a clear entrance, and there were smaller branches woven between the larger ones to fill gaps. I'd seen pictures of Sasquatch shelters that hunters claimed to find, but this was different, more refined, and relatively fresh. The branches weren't weathered or covered in moss yet. I stood there for a long time, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was from a previous owner. Maybe some hikers had built it on my land without permission. But the property had been empty for 5 years before I bought it. And this structure wasn't that old. I took photos with my phone and hiked back to the cabin. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who built it? Why on my property? Were they still around? The next day, I drove to town and bought 4 trail cameras, the kind hunters use to monitor game. I set them up around the clearing where I'd found the structure, positioning them to capture anyone approaching from different angles. The cameras were motion-activated with night vision and could record for weeks on their SD cards. I felt a little paranoid doing it, but I needed to know what was happening on my land. For the first week, the cameras captured exactly what you'd expect: deer, a few elk, raccoons, a black bear that wandered through one evening, normal Pacific Northwest wildlife. I started to relax, thinking maybe the structure had been there longer than I thought, that whoever built it was long gone. Then I checked the cameras on day 8. The first 3 cameras showed nothing unusual, but the 4th camera, positioned to face the structure directly, had captured something during the night. The footage was dark, lit only by the camera's infrared, giving everything that eerie black and white glow. The timestamp showed 2:47 a.m. For the first few seconds, nothing moved. Then something entered the frame from the left. It was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, and moved on 2 legs. That's where normal ended. The proportions were wrong. Arms too long, torso too narrow, head oddly shaped. It moved with a fluid, deliberate gait that didn't look quite human. It approached the structure and began working on it, adding branches, reinforcing sections. The movements were purposeful, intelligent. This wasn't an animal randomly piling sticks. This was construction. I watched the footage 3 times, my hands shaking. The figure worked for 11 minutes, then walked out of frame the way it had come. I checked the other cameras for the same timestamp, hoping to get a clearer view, but none of them had captured it approaching or leaving. It had somehow avoided the other 3 cameras. That was creepy enough, but then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The structure it was working on, I could see something inside it now. The camera angle and infrared made it hard to tell exactly what. But there were objects arranged on what looked like a small shelf or platform built into the structure. I recognized one of them, my coffee mug, the one that had gone missing from my porch 2 weeks ago. The thing, whatever it was, had been taking my belongings and storing them in its structure, like trophies or decorations, or like it was studying me. I didn't go back to the clearing that day. I stayed in the cabin, windows locked, trying to convince myself I'd misidentified what I'd seen. Maybe it was just someone in unusual clothing, a squatter living on my land. That would explain the structure, the stolen items, everything. But I couldn't shake the way it had moved, the proportions, the way it had avoided 3 cameras but walked right past the 4th, like it knew they were there but didn't care about that particular one. That night, I heard sounds outside the cabin. Not footsteps exactly, but movement. Branches snapping, something large moving through the trees behind the cabin. I looked out the window, but saw nothing in the darkness. The sounds continued for about 20 minutes, circling the cabin, then stopped. In the morning, I found wet prints on my porch. Not quite human. Longer, narrower, with toe spacing that looked wrong. They led from the tree line to my door, where they stopped. Whatever made them had stood at my door, probably while I was inside sleeping. I checked the trail cameras again. The same figure had appeared on 2 cameras this time, 3:14 a.m. It was carrying something. As I watched, it approached the structure and added the item to its collection inside. It was my dish towel. This time, the figure did something new. After placing the towel, it turned and looked directly at the camera. The infrared made its features hard to distinguish, but I could see eyes reflecting the light. Too large, too far apart. It stared at the camera for almost a full minute, motionless, then walked away. It knew. It knew I was watching. Over the next week, the situation escalated. Every night, the cameras captured the figure visiting the structure, adding items. Some I recognized as things that had gone missing from my porch or the area around my cabin: a garden trowel, a flashlight, a baseball cap. Others I didn't recognize, which meant it was bringing items from somewhere else. The structure was growing. Each night, it added new sections, expanding upward and outward. By day 10, it was 8 feet tall and had what looked like multiple chambers or rooms. The construction quality was remarkable, stable, weatherproof, carefully designed, and it was positioned to watch my cabin. I realized the clearing wasn't random. From that spot, you had a clear line of sight to my cabin's back windows. The structure was built facing my direction. Whatever was building, it wanted to watch me. I tried calling the sheriff's office, but when I started explaining about something building a structure and stealing my belongings, I could hear the skepticism in the dispatcher's voice. They said they'd send someone to check it out, but the nearest deputy was 40 minutes away, and they had priority calls. Translation: they thought I was crazy or paranoid. I decided to go to the structure myself during daylight, when I felt safer. I grabbed a rifle I kept for bears, more for confidence than anything, and hiked out to the clearing. The structure was even more impressive in person. It was now about 9 feet tall with walls that were tightly woven and surprisingly sturdy. The entrance faced my direction, and I could see inside to where my stolen items were arranged almost ritualistically on platforms made from flat stones. But there were other items too. Clothes that weren't mine. A child's backpack. A hiking boot. A cell phone that looked like it had been there for years. Driver's licenses in small plastic bags, arranged in a row, maybe 20 of them. My chest tightened. These weren't just my belongings. This thing had been collecting items from other people. Lots of other people. I pulled out my phone to take photos, and that's when I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. The camera closest to me, the one I'd mounted on a tree about 20 feet away, was turned around. It was no longer pointing at the structure. It was pointing at me. Something had repositioned it. Something that understood what cameras were and what they did. I heard movement behind me and spun around. Nothing there, just trees and shadows. But then I heard it from my left, then from my right. The sounds were deliberate, coordinated. I was being circled. I backed toward the structure, rifle raised, turning in circles, trying to see what was out there. The sound stopped. Everything went silent, that deep forest silence where even birds stopped singing. Then I saw them. There were 3 of them, standing motionless at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by trees. Tall, too thin, with those 2 long arms hanging at their sides. They didn't move, just stood there watching me with those large, reflective eyes. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the rifle. I wanted to run, but every instinct told me that running would trigger a chase response. Very slowly, I started backing away, keeping the rifle pointed in their direction. They didn't follow. They just watched. When I reached the edge of the clearing, I turned and walked quickly back toward my cabin, fighting every urge to run. I could feel them watching me the entire way. Back at the cabin, I locked every door and window. I called the sheriff's office again, and this time I lied. Said I'd seen armed trespassers on my property building illegal structures. That got their attention. They said a deputy would be there within the hour. While I waited, I reviewed the trail camera footage from that morning. One of the cameras had captured me hiking to the clearing, and it had captured them following me. All 3 figures, moving through the trees parallel to my path, staying just out of my sight, coordinating their movements. They'd been hurting me, letting me think I was making the choice to go to the clearing, but actually guiding me there. The deputy arrived, and I showed him everything: the footage, the structure, the stolen items. He was skeptical until he saw the driver's licenses. His expression changed immediately. "Some of these names," he said quietly, "these are people who've gone missing. Hikers, Campers, years ago. They brought in more people, detectives, Forest Service, eventually FBI. They documented the structure and collected the items as evidence. 7 of the driver's licenses belonged to people who had vanished in the Cascade Range over the past 15 years. Just disappeared without a trace while hiking. But they never found the figures. Whatever they were gone. The trail cameras captured nothing after that day. The structure stood empty. The FBI told me it was likely a person, or persons, who'd been living illegally on forest land, preying on hikers. They were probably scared off when law enforcement showed up. They advised me to install better security and to call immediately if I saw any suspicious activity. But I know what I saw. Those weren't people. The proportions, the movement, the eyes, those weren't human. I still own the property, but I don't stay there anymore. I tried for about a month after the investigation, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. And every morning, I'd find the trail cameras repositioned, pointing toward the cabin instead of away from it. No footage, no motion detected. They were just turned around like something was reminding me that it knew I was watching, and it was watching back. The structure was dismantled by forensics, but when I hiked out there last month to check on the property, there was a new one. Smaller, more hidden, but definitely there. Built in the same style, with the same careful construction. And inside, on a stone platform, was my watch, the one I'd been wearing last month that went missing one night. I know I locked the cabin. I know the doors and windows were secure, but somehow it got inside, took my watch, and left it in the new structure like an offering or a message. I'm selling the property. I don't care what I lose on the deal. Whatever's out there, it's claimed that land as its own, and it's made clear that it doesn't appreciate humans living there, watching it, trying to understand it. The cameras are still up. I check them remotely sometimes, from my apartment back in Seattle. Last week, one of them captured something. A figure standing at the edge of the clearing in broad daylight, holding something up toward the camera. It was a new trail camera, still in the box. It was returning one that had gone missing 3 days earlier, placing it where I could find it, showing me that it understands the game we're playing. I don't check the footage anymore. I don't want to see what else it might show me. Because I'm starting to realize that the scariest thing isn't what it's building out there. It's what it's learning.